Roll call. Councilmember Soto. Councilmember Moran.
Present.
Councilmember King.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia.
Present.
Mayor Aguilar.
Present.
For the record, Councilmember Soto is not in attendance, but her absence is excused.
Does everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. You guys please remain standing for a moment of silence for military members and first responders. Thank you. Council, do we have any changes to the agenda at this time? I see no changes. We're going to move on to our item awards presentations, proclamations. We want to, City Manager, just introduce
Sure.
our next 4 presentations.
Yes. First of all, esteemed public, mayor and council, and also our visiting attorneys, we're taking a little different approach that you probably are used to. We're just having, what we would like is each firm to have an opportunity to just, present yourselves, talk about your credentials, where you guys are located, anything you might want to add. And then we're going to allow the public, after each presentation, allow the public to ask any questions. And we'll do that, we'll do a question and answer for a little bit. Then after that, we'll go into the next presentation from the next firm and so forth and so on. And then the council, towards the end, depending on how long it takes, the council then will go into closed session. And then we have some questions that we formulated, and then we can ask, you guys won't all be in at the same time under closed session. You would be individually interviewed, and then we'll go from there, okay? So with that, the first firm that we would like to present tonight is a presentation by White Brenner LLP. And if you can just make your way up to the podium here, and there's a microphone should be on, and then just present yourself for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, so for the record, my name is Doug White. I'm the first name partner in White Brenner. Along with me is someone I've been friends with since the time I had hair, Tom Hallinan. So he's known me a really long time, dating back into a bunch of fun stuff that we've done locally. I'm going to go a little bit about the firm history real quick, try my best to get done in 15 minutes, and then we'll kind of introduce each of ourselves and our credentials. There is one other individual that's on our team that we presented, Nubia Goldstein. She is visiting family in Colombia. It was a little hard to change those plans given all the circumstances that goes into traveling these days. So she sends her regards and best, but she's thinking of us from Colombia. But she's there and she's part of our team. So White Brenner's been around for almost 10 years now. It was formed largely by a bunch of attorneys who were working in big law firms. So I worked at Greenberg Traurig. At the time I was there, it's the 15th largest firm in the world. Barbara Brenner was at Stoll Reeves. Randy Pollock was also at Greenberg Traurig. And then subsequently, Deborah Henshaw Vieira was at Littler Mendelsohn on the labor and employment side. So we kind of came through and we each had our own little niche, including Tom, who lives locally in Ceres, that we kind of fulfilled. So my role was more on the real estate land use side, kind of pretty strong on the entitlements, things of that nature. I used to do a lot of major home builders down in Southern California and Santa Monica and the Bay Area. And so that was kind of my background that I brought in. But I was born in Modesto, grew up in Los Banos. I'm going to date myself. I used to work as an intern in Rusty Reyes' office. And so, so I'm from, so I'm a Stanislaus Merced guy, which is probably one of the reasons in Tom's relationships that our firm is, so prominent in kind of Stanislaus and Merced County. So we represent 6 of the 9 cities in Stanislaus County, and we still continue to represent Atwater and other communities in Merced County. But that being said, our firm is a statewide firm. We are based in Sacramento. We're located directly next to the League of California Cities. Like there's about 6 inches that separates our building. But we have clients all the way from San Diego area all the way up to the Oregon border. We currently have active over 50 counties, cities that we represent. And some of the stuff that we've done, most notably is the litigation against the Bureau of Cannabis Control recently, where we were fighting to protect local control and what was ultimately promised when that proposition was passed in terms of local control of cannabis and what comes in and out and is sold in the communities. We should have a good press release coming out next week that we're excited about. But that was done in coordination with the League of California Cities. I've also served on the board of the Municipal Law Handbook as one of the editors in the section, things of that nature. The firm, we've kept it small. We don't want to have a whole bunch of satellite offices. That's not our model. The people who are before you are the people who you're going to always deal with. And you can call us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and some of them do, particularly when the newspaper comes out at 3 o'clock in the morning if there's an interesting article that's in there. I think what makes us different, we're probably one of the only law firms that maintains a lobbying presence in Sacramento. Almost everybody who's worked for our firm has worked either in the state legislature. I was a chief of staff for an assembly member and was a lobbyist for the California Bankers Association before I started practicing. Or in the alternative, they worked for a state regulatory agency. So Nubia worked also in the state legislature. Tom, as he'll tell you, kind of worked in one of the regulatory agencies. So that's the background we bring in. I think one of the assets that has is we're constantly in the Capitol, and our kids go to school with regulators, and so you find out more. You find out information. You have a little bit more readily access to that kind of information. Kind of when you're dialed in. Our office is about a block and a half, 2 blocks away from the Capitol, and so I think that's something that makes us different. I think we have the best jobs in the world because we get to fulfill that political itch without having to be in the lovely seats that you all sit in. So with that, I'll let Tom introduce himself, and hopefully we'll stay on time.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. Yeah, so I'm the local guy. I didn't work for any of those big firms. I worked for my dad's firm over in Oakdale, established in 1923, and we've done nothing but represent small local governmental agencies in Stanislaus, Merced County, and up in the foothills. So I've done it for 27 years. About a dozen agencies, and it's my life's work. My personal life changes, but the one thing that stays the same is my work, and my work is cities and special districts. I'm going to say one thing that I think that sets us out. I know you guys like to get right to the point. A lot of lawyers are very conservative. Oh, you can't do that because of this and that. And we view our job as you want to do something, we're going to do everything that we can to get you to that goal. Now, we're not going to let you do anything you shouldn't do, but we're also not going to run scared. I think that's a big difference with us and other local government firms that I deal with. Again, I'm a local guy. This is what I do, and I want to do it for you. And let's just get right to folks' questions, if that's all right with you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'll bring it back to council for any questions, and then we'll open up for public comment, public questions. Council, do you guys have any initial questions at this time?
We got the hot seat to start it off. So.
Okay. So I'll take it out for public comment, see if anybody out in the audience wants to ask any questions to our first group.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, all the representatives from law firms. It's great to see a large number turnout that gives city right choices. Thank you. I don't have a particular question for or regarding this law firm, and I kind of missed a couple of minutes of the initial presentation. But one thing, if they can kind of tell about their firm, maybe they can tell what kind of in-house expertise that they do have, because as we know, sometimes cities have unique requirements. Sometimes we may have an issue with, workers' comp or personal matters or water issues. It may be helpful to know if they have in-house expertise, or does the city have to go out and look for another firm? So that might be helpful. Thank you.
So generally speaking, there's nothing in our firm's bandwidth of attorneys that you guys are going to need that we won't be able to service. So most of the stuff that's going to come up through insurance is going to go through risk management, or you have some kind of insurance carrier. We don't do workers' comp, but you have workers' compensation insurance, and you're going to have folks that they're going to appoint. The risk management litigation cases are going to get picked up by your carriers again. You don't really have to worry about the tax issues. I mean, you're not on the coast, so we don't need help on the coastal commission. So, we don't have to worry about that. So there's nothing that's going to come up that we haven't done. And I can say that because we represent like a lot of people all around you with very similar issues. We've represented Turlock, we've represented Atwater, we represent, 6 of the 9 cities in Stanislaus County. The issues that you have are the ones that we're dealing with in every day. On the ground, and I come from a dairy family. I mean, I know what it's like to live in this community. I mean, I grew up in Los Banos. It's there's a lot of similarities. So, with that, I feel very confident that there's nothing that we won't be able to handle that you'll come up with. That doesn't mean that we don't use independent investigators for employment issues, issues where maybe having a different perspective whether it compromises you in negotiations or down the road or something. That there are certain circumstances that with council's buy-in we would bring in folks that come in. I think one of the last things to kind of dovetail onto that. List our specialties. So I'm a land use area, so I'm a land use real estate attorney. Transactional side, leaning kind of crossover with Barbara Brenner over at CEQA. Barbara Brenner kind of takes over from CEQA, does natural resources, environmental law, water law. We're working on the GSAs in the area, things of that nature. Tom, gets really involved with litigation pitches, day-to-day, general municipal type stuff. Nubia Goldstein does a lot of our litigation, code enforcement stuff, because, a lot of us had to deal with a lot of cannabis grow houses lately and kind of things related to that. So, we would deal with that as well as kind of like the different levels of entitlement. Deborah Hinshaw Vieira does our labor and employment, as well as Aaron Durvin, who kind of has a specialty subset in public safety, specifically issues with, obviously police and fire. So there's really no issue that we don't cross over. We have online portal for free training for anybody who wants to do it. We don't charge for that. Prints out the certificates, gets you in compliance with AB 1234. We have a task manager system that people can log into if they want and check and see what tasks are in the queue and when the return time is. Some of that's obviously confidential. But council members can have access to that, as well as directors and staff. So we try to stay pretty ahead of the curve and technology-wise as well. I think COVID's helped that. We kind of had to double down and get even better at it. So we tried to take the positives that we can from the last year. But again, pretty much everything that you have, and we're all kind of ingrained with this government agricultural background. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from the public at this time?
Margarita Aguilar. I had just had a question. I heard you talk about the cannabis, and it was kind of really quick. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what are some of the issues that some of the cities you represent have dealt with? And that's pretty much my interest at this moment. Thank you.
So cannabis, right? So we've done most of the cannabis entitlement in the area, but I mean, so let me take it going back. Some of our cities were some of the very first to permit cannabis. And we did a multi-angle approach. The first one with the development agreement to kind of create a contractual relationship for the public benefit amount. We backed that up with a conditional use permit because I don't want to get into a long, drawn-out squabble with folks. That takes me a long time to shut them down. Conditional use permit, you can pull much quicker. So we have that layer of the onion, and then we back it up with a tax that's voted on that gives us the ability to go up to 15%. That kind of backs that down in case the public benefit ever was legally challenged and held to be deficient. So we still would be able to maintain our money. That's kind of the problem that's gone on in Sacramento recently. They didn't have development agreements in that same way and do that. So we kind of set that structure up. Again, most of the cities that are around you, we put in place their we put in place that structure. But with that comes the burden of making sure that the people who aren't operating legally, that that you're taking care of that. So we've had some significant issues throughout Merced and Stanislaus County with illegal grows and grow houses and some of the environmental effects that come from when that happens. So it's just making sure that the code enforcement is up to speed, does it right. We're able to put liens in place to be able to recover the attorney's fees and staff time, and kind of take everybody through that process. But it's about education. It's everything from working with the public to understand that process and what the options are, as well as with the folks who do it. So when we were when we did it for Turlock, we had 45 people who applied for 4 permits. So it was taking that through that kind of RFP process. So there's nothing that we have done that, and again, you take that into the BCC litigation where we've litigated against the Bureau of Cannabis Control to preserve local control. I think the biggest issue is we have places like the city of Newman who don't allow it. We have places like the City of Angels Camp that wants to allow it, but from places outside the area. We have places like Sonora who until recently only wanted to allow medicinal, right? So we all of our solutions are catered to the wills of the council. And it's our job to give you options and set those options before you, give you the pros and cons of each. And it's your guys' job to make the decision, right? Knowing what it is. Again, if we've done our job, it's an educated decision though. And I think that that's where we come in and can be really helpful in terms of making sure that you have full information. Because if you make a decision and it's not based on good information, or if that information turns out to be wrong, then I think that that's where you get to hold your city attorney accountable. So hopefully that helps.
Very briefly, if I could add, I think this is one of the areas, cannabis, that distinguishes us from other folks. We had some people who were in dire need of some financial help, and they said, what can we do on this cannabis? We keep hearing that we have to do a tax and we have to do this. And we said, no, you can do it with the development agreement. Everybody said, no, you can't do it with a development agreement. You're going to be challenged. It's not going to work. Well, it worked, and those cities were able to bring in a couple extra $1 million and keep them afloat.
Thank you. Any further questions from the public?
Good evening, everyone. My question is, there's been questions and confusions around the Brown Act before in our city. Have you had experience around the Brown Act violations, and what steps are you or have you taken to ensure, or will you take to ensure, that the council is following and understands the Brown Act?
So, first of all, we do a series of trainings, and we do that at our cost. We never charge for our trainings. We feel like that's kind of our investment back in the city of being kind of a good partner, because most of the places that we've been at for a really, really long time. So we have in-person trainings that we do on Brown Act. We have online trainings that are free that people can do to learn about the Brown Act. And then there's always those one-on-one conversations and relationships that you have to develop with council to make sure that they're doing it right. That being said, we have a responsibility to the public in the role that we serve in to make sure that that the council is doing what they should do. Y'all hire us, but we don't. We would be the city attorney for the city, and that's at the direction of the city manager and the council. But there are other fiduciary duties, and as there's a record, it was a certain time where we had to turn in council members to the district attorney because they blatantly, openly were violating the Brown Act, and the district attorney dealt with them appropriately, and that was in Merced County. So it was with Larry Morris, the previous DA. So, you can go talk to some folks in Atwater if you need more information on that question. So Brian can fill you all in. So.
Any other questions from the public at this time?
Okay, Catherine Shell Rodriguez, wearing my elected city treasurer's hat and watchdog for the people of Livingston. My question is that when you are working on a task, how do you bill? By the quarter hour or a similar segment? Second question, do you charge for travel in order to do things like attend city council meetings? And if so, how much? The last one is, would your firm have any problem giving me a copy of your monthly invoices? I understand you might have to redact some things, but would you have any problem giving me a monthly copy of the invoice that you are billing the city?
So last one's easy. That information is required to be released via the Public Record Act, so we'd have no problem doing it. There was an audit of 10 special districts that was done in the Central Coast. We happen to represent San Miguel Community Service District. Our firm came out the highest and the most responsive when they went and looked at that information. I'd be happy to pass on that gentleman's name so you can go and call him yourself if you want to know about that. So, I mean, some stuff has to be redacted because of for obvious reasons, but we have no problem releasing that level of information. What was the first part? Oh, travel. We don't charge for travel. So unless it's outside the city itself. So if we wind up having to go to court in Fresno or something like that, or Sacramento, then we would charge for travel time there. But to do kind of the city's day-to-day business, then we don't charge for that. We feel like that's represented in our rate that we offered. Is there anything else?
I'll just be down the highway, so I won't be charged.
Billing. So billing, we bill in 6/10 of the hour, so every 6-minute increment we bill. We do often do, like for instance, when we were working with Turlock, we did personnel rules on a updated their personnel rules on a flat rate. So I think this is just where having a good relationship with the council and the city manager and the directors kind of matters, because you know when it's appropriate to go for a flat rate, you know when it's appropriate to just go by the hour. I would say 95% of the time we're probably by the hour. And I think that's probably how most everybody else is billing. But so it's in 6-minute increments.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So this will be for all the law firms. Might as well make it now. How do you guys handle training or support when there's conflicts of interest? Maybe sometimes the council doesn't know that there's a conflict. I mean, they might reach out to you guys for advice. And do you offer training? Because seems like they don't actually know sometimes.
Yeah. So we offer training on conflict of interest. I think most everybody here probably does. But we do training in addition to things that come up through your ethics and AB 1, 2, 3, 4 training. I happen to, I used to work for the Fair Political Practices Commission some time ago in the legal division. So I wrote some of those opinions. So we do that. I will say, I mean, the reality of it is, as a member of the public, you're probably not going to know whether or not I've talked to one of the council members about that. There would be some confidentiality and some attorney-client privileges is that. But again, this is where having a really good relationship with your city manager, getting maps of property interest and economic interest that you have, and knowing where you work all come in, so that when we do our agenda review, if we spot something that you don't, that we're calling you. That being said, conflicts of interest tends to be very personal to the individual, and so again, having a good relationship so that you guys feel comfortable reaching out and feeling like you can get your questions answered on that issue.
Thank you. Any further questions from the public at this time? Anybody on the phone have any questions? And I think somebody provided some questions via text message, and Monica's going to go ahead and ask those questions.
Okay, these questions will be asked to each firm. So the first question, how will the city attorney deal with encouraging council members to be ethical? Second question, do any of you speak Spanish or Punjabi, considering our residents? Third question, will there be transparent about investigations into council members' inappropriate behavior? Question 4, can and should council members become involved in personnel matters, like direct staff to do things?
Well, we educate council members if the need arises, but something I was taught by my dad, who did this work for 50 years, was you're not the sixth council member, so don't stick your nose farther than it needs to go. So we'll tell you what you need to know, what you recommend, what you might need to do, but you're the boss. Again, we still will, look into everything that we need to legally, appropriately, but we're not the sixth council member. The other question, I don't speak any other language. Both my wives speak Spanish, all my kids. I know one of my mother-in-laws got so mad at me. She says, "You've been in this family for 20 years, you can't speak 20 words." And I just never, I used to say, well, I'm too busy with the law business, but there's probably no excuse for that. But we are a bilingual firm. Nubia is available. Sometimes we have meetings where we need her to cover for us. Like there's a big public, a lot of public participation, then she'll take the meeting for us. So I hope that answers all the questions.
So I think it's about a third of our office speaks Spanish. I don't know that we have anybody who speaks Punjabi at the moment. I'd have to go back and check, but I'm not aware of anyone who does. Nubia Goldstein, who would be the deputy city attorney, is fluent, and it's her first language, though. Spanish, not Punjabi. Did I hit all of them? I think I missed one.
About, will they be transparent about investigations into council members' inappropriate behavior?
Yeah, I think you can just look at what we've done in other cities and look at newspaper articles to figure out that we have no problem doing that.
Okay.
I mean, we do, if we don't, then our reputation is in the dirt, and so you don't stick around in this business very long if that's how you do things. So, I mean, again, we take direction from the council. We have a fiduciary obligation to the community, and we take both of those, very seriously. But I found that most of this gets resolved just by having a well-educated council on what they can and cannot do, and lots of different options, because people tend to make the right decisions when it's presented with them, when that opportunity is presented to them.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
So are we allowed to come back multiple times with questions, or are we allowed just one time, ask all your questions? How does that work?
So after each presentation, we'll have an opportunity for more questions. And just for the attorneys here present, probably some of the questions are going to be repeated. And I know I've seen some of you guys jotting down some of those questions. But yeah, you have an opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any further questions. At this time, I'll bring it back to council. Anybody have any other questions?
Yes, so actually I do have a couple of questions. One of them is, so by reading your presentation in over 100 pages, I did enjoy the reading.
I'm sorry.
It's good, it's okay, I'm used to
I
it.
think we sent it electronically to kill less trees, too. So.
But, it's expected to have all the beautiful things that you guys have done and all the experience, but I don't expect to ever see something that went bad. A bad experience, a case that you had to deal with any other city that you can, be honest and say, you know what, this did not go very well. I probably would have done this a little bit different. Is there a case that you can refer to?
So, that's the best way to answer this. So, I recently got fired in Turlock, so there was that. I mean, what could I have done differently? It's really hard when you get two new electeds and they you're doing what the for majority kind of dictated on council you had to do, and then there's that change, and then they want to have a clean slate of literally every director, every city manager, every thing. So that wasn't the greatest experience. It's the first time it's happened in my career, and it's still a little raw. But I feel like I absolutely left Turlock in a better place than it was before when we came in there. They had $4 million left in reserve. We got Measure A passed, we got the cannabis and tax. They now have $20 million extra dollars per year in their general fund that they didn't have in the course of the year and a half that I was there. I also took down the general fund budget from just over $1 million down to 415. My budget was 400. I had to be really austere and figure out how to be resourceful in order to be able to do that. And I had some directors at time doing it, but there was communication with the council there. I think the biggest compliment that came from that is they hired me back as special counsel and keep sending me more work. They just needed their own guy, which most of us know George Petrolakis, and he's a great guy. Can kind of go and do that. So I view that as a failure because it's the first time it's ever happened to me in my career. Are there things that we could have done differently? They're hard, but at the end of the day, I got to take direction from the majority of council. So I guess that's the newest Ross one. It's close. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And my other question is, can you tell us how you would handle a situation where your interpretation is different from that of the DA, for instance, in this case, or
You mean the district attorney or like the city manager? So there's a couple. I think that the biggest thing is we have great relationships with our city managers all the time. And so we go to council and if we don't agree on something, he says, okay, this is my perspective on it. I say, this is my perspective. We give our whys and it's not personal, right? And then council gets to make a decision based off of what's presented. If you have a good relationship with your city manager, it's never going to become that. It's not an equal relationship though. We are contractors. The city manager is here every day, right? So I'm going to tell you right now that there's a lot of deference that goes to the city manager because of the fact that they are here on a day-to-day basis and they know how things flow. But you guys should and deserve the opportunity to if there's a difference of opinion, to know how and why and to have both of those opinions presented to you. But at the end of the day, it's not our job to tell you what to do. It's our job to educate you on the different options that are available to you such that you can make an educated decision. You may be more bullish on an issue than I am. Maybe there's a piece of litigation that I think we can win, but it's going to cost a lot of money, right? And I take a fiscally conservative approach and I say, I don't think, it's not my recommendation that we would do this, but here's your different options. Here's what I think it would cost. And council I've had several councils who decided to take a more aggressive position and go for the litigation. It's our job to execute on your direction, though. When you say go, our job is to win, right? And so it's our job to do the best that we can to achieve that results. But in that time and in that moment, it's our job to handicap it for you and give you that information so you can make a decision. So we don't get we don't really get wed to our decision because we got 4 or 5 different options that you get presented with and you pick.
I have a quick question. Obviously, you prepared for this interview. You probably did some research on the city. So what would you say some of the challenges or opportunities would be to working with the city of Livingston?
You want to take that? Well, let me just start. I think every city is going to continue to deal with the budget constraints and growth, and how we grow and making sure that it's smart. So I think that that's where I would kind of start. I think the reality of it is you have a lot of really good base structures, but Tom has a lot of history here because he was here. 10, 15 years ago. So I'll let him kind of take over from there on what he would do.
Well, the economics is always the major challenge, I find, because that causes a lot of your problems. And I apologize. Doug's taking the lead tonight. I talked about my dad. I just left there to come here. I've been there the last few days, so I apologize. I'm not at my best here, but I want to say what was it? The early 2000s, I had a dispute with the city manager at the time here regarding Foster Farms. and this is public, so I'm not waiving any, I'm not breaking any privilege because this later became public, but he wanted an opinion on a case against Foster Farms, and I ethically could not sign off on that, and we parted ways. I parted ways with the city county, and we had a brief closed session on that, and I was extremely upset about that, and that's something I would change. And I learned a lesson. I never, regardless of how difficult the situation is, we're going to disagree. We're not going to get mad about it. We're just going to move on. So that's something I learned and changed. That was about halfway through my career. I've been doing this for 27 years. I was, 15 years ago. So that's the biggest lesson I learned. So I find, well, I'm going to leave it at that.
So budget, level of service, recruitment of talent and retention of talent. I think those are all the same issues. I don't know this for a fact, but I would suspect you have issues with illegal grows and cannabis, things of that nature. And so making sure that you grow right and things are done correctly. So with that, if there's any other questions.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate your, any other questions, Council, at this time? So we appreciate, oh, go ahead, Jose.
Just real quick, because I'm really bad with names, and I know there's two of you up there, but who is Tom and that's Tom?
He's Tom. I'm Doug.
Okay.
I have a commitment on the night, so Tom would be the one that we're pitching. In all candor, not to be overly dramatic, Tom just got notice that his dad is in the process of passing away, so I'm talking more tonight because of that. So,
Sorry to hear.
yeah, so.
Sorry to hear that. So thank you so much for the presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next group. It's a presentation by Cole Huber LLP. Thank you, gentlemen.
To try to keep the process balanced, the public who ask questions, please ask the same questions again to the firm as they come up. Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, council members, City Manager Ramirez. I'm Dave Ritchie. I'm a partner with Cole Huber. I'm here with Derek Cole, who's one of the founding partners of the firm. And we are very pleased to share our proposal with you for your city attorney services. Just a little bit about my background. I've been an attorney here in California for since 2012. And prior to that, did a lot of public sector labor employment work. So in addition to municipal law, where all of our attorneys have a base of competency, and that is in government operations, ethics, the Brown Act, and transparency, which is very critical, and obviously, dealing with council members and things like that. We each have our own specialty areas in our firm. So one of my specialty areas is public sector labor and employment, which I've done for about 20 years. I'm currently a city attorney in the city of Willows, California, previously a city attorney at Chowchilla for approximately 4 years. I also serve as general counsel to the Housing Authority of the County of Merced, and also general counsel to the Del Puerto Healthcare District, just across the valley floor. Others in our firm represent various public entities, cities, counties, special districts. I have previous experience working in counties as well, and I serve as special counsel to a variety of different cities on labor and employment matters. So I'd like to give Derek a couple minutes of opportunity just to talk about the firm itself and its history so that you can get a picture of that. But before I do that, I also want to outline that we have identified for you a team of attorneys with different competency areas that I think address some of the concerns that you have here in the city. First, with recruitment retention, I know that you have your own police force, and police recruitment is a big issue. So I have public sector labor and employment background. Also, that includes police and fire. Derek, for his part, is aware of all of the CEQA and land use issues. I know that the city has annexed a portion and is planning for future development, and so those land use components that are important to this city are there. So I remember there was a question specifically about challenges that face the city of Livingston as we move forward. Those are some key areas right there, because the land use development drives your economic growth. It drives your residences, And doing that responsibly is really important. So Derek will touch on that, I would expect, in his presentation. Others in our group include Sam Emerson. He's a code enforcement attorney. He does code enforcement. And I know that the city has targeted efforts to help reduce and minimize things like graffiti in town, for example. And so the code enforcement type of activities that Sam is so expert at will serve you very well in that regard. So we did take a look at some of the priorities and things like that that are available through the city about the efforts that they're doing to address these issues that you've faced in the past. Those are 3 or 4 specific ones that I wanted to highlight for you that we have an expertise in as well. So I'm just going to hand over to Derek for a moment. He'll talk about the firm, and then we'll proceed further. Thank you.
I noticed there's a clock here. What do you think would happen if you turned that 5-minute clock on us as attorneys? That might be something we just couldn't handle. And I know I'm someone, I actually have to enforce that. So I saw that here and I'm thinking, are we going to have to do our presentation in 5 minutes? So we appreciate your indulgence. My name is Derek Cole. As Dave mentioned, I am the managing partner and a co-founder of Cole Huber. I am a city attorney currently for the city of Oakley in East Contra Costa County and Sutter Creek in Amador County. My range of experience in municipal law is from Sutter Creek, a population of 3,000, to Antioch, 115,000 population, where I served as a very long-term interim city attorney. So I've got a pretty wide range from very small to, not the largest, but certainly large, and everything in between. I specialize in municipal law, and I love what I do. I absolutely get up every morning and I look forward to the day. It doesn't mean that there aren't some days that I wish I didn't have to work as hard or work as many hours, but what we do, and I'm sure all of us here, who all of the attorneys can attest, our jobs are interesting. Every day is different. And some days I'm doing land use, some days I'm doing records, some days I'm doing law enforcement, some days I'm doing code enforcement, some days I'm doing finance, some days I'm doing water and wastewater. But what happens with all of those things is there's some interesting angle. And at the end of the day, what I do, what Dave does, what all of us here who are lawyers do is we problem solve. And we could all probably go have been corporate lawyers doing contract disputes day in, day out. We could have made probably 2 or 3 times more per hour than all of us bill. But we love what we do. And municipal law is something I am deeply passionate about. And so it's something that I'm proud to be a managing partner of a firm that specializes in that. Our firm, I'm proud to say, is celebrating its 15th anniversary. We broke off of a larger firm, or actually a large firm, 15 years ago, and we have worked very hard to provide a model that works for our public agency clients. And we have a very distinct philosophy. It's very simple. It's 3 words. It's accuracy, responsiveness, and value. That's our philosophy in 3 words. Accuracy, you expect us to get the law right. You expect us to be effective at what we do. And we hire excellent attorneys. We are all actively involved. I spend a lot of my time giving to the League of California Cities, what we used to call the League, what we now call Cal Cities. I write amicus briefs as a hobby. Amicus briefs are friend of court briefs that we submit to the courts. I've been told that I should look for other hobbies or more interesting hobbies, but I actually think that it's a good hobby. Responsiveness, you'll never have trouble getting a hold of us. You will have our cell phones. You will have our emails. You can text us. You can call us. All of us in the municipal world, we have to give a little bit, which means that we don't have 9 to 5 hours. And certainly you don't. You're getting constituent calls day in, day out. You can't probably go to the supermarket without being stopped by someone who wants to talk to you about something. You should expect the same from us. And so you will always get a call back. You will always get action, and we will be there for you. We are responsive. And then finally, value. I am a managing partner of my law firm. And so I have to do what you do, which is I have to make a budget for my firm, and then I have to make sure that we follow the budget for our firm. I have to make sure that we're making sound economic decisions, that we're spending money on things that matter and not spending money on things that don't matter. And so in many ways, I'm doing what you're doing, and I run my law firm that way. And as a result, I feel like we are able to give you a big firm level of service and bring a big firm level of expertise, but at much less than the big firm rates with all of their overhead and their multiple offices and their high rents and all of the overhead that they have. So that's our philosophy. It's a very simple 3-word philosophy, and I feel like that's what really distinguishes us as a firm. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. And we wrote down the questions. Sorry, we wrote down the questions, but do you want to have folks come and ask us again?
I'll bring it back to council and see if initially anybody has any questions, or council? We'll take it out. If you have the questions written down, that'll be great. And then if the public has additional questions, they could come up.
We do.
The first question was that I didn't write down the very first gentleman. I think it was basically what we do, kind of, sir. What was it? It was more of a.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to participate at this moment. The question was, and I'm starting to forget, is what in-house expertise do you have as it pertains to workers' comp? And when I say workers' comp, or I know we have risk management, I understand that. The idea behind having legal representation is that it doesn't go to risk management. It doesn't go there. That's the intention behind asking, what in-house expertise do you folks have when it comes to CEQA, workers' comp, personal matters? That's the kind of, what specialties do you have?
I remember your question. Thank you very much. And the clarification is useful. So there are certain service areas where we would not normally operate, such as work comp, where you're covered by an insurer, some kinds of like taxation laws. We also don't serve as bond counsel for you, because that's outside of the normal scope. And you actually are required to have separate counsel for those kinds of things. In other areas, though, that are more in tune with the day-to-day activities that a city will face, things like CEQA, land use, transactional work, code enforcement, general litigation, labor and employment. So I have a background in labor and employment law of 20 years, specifically in the public sector, also dealing with police, fire, professional, and all sorts of different kinds of miscellaneous employees. That extends not just to the labor relations work, but also to the day-to-day employment items that might come up. That includes employee discipline, dealing with employee complaints or grievances, those kinds of things. So that's an expertise area that I personally have. Derek, for example, has the land use and CEQA. One of the other individuals in our proposal, Sam Emerson, is a code enforcement attorney. While we all do the municipal law work, which is the ethics, the Brown Act and transparency, the general advice council work that goes with dealing with a council, each of us in our firm, and this is, I think, a point that separates us from many of the others. Each of us have our own passion areas. These passion areas that we have built over the years that we've been in practice, and we focus in on those things. So we have what we call a full-service law firm. Other than the things that you would seek outside counsel for that I identified, like bond counsel and taxation, we have the capability within to handle almost every issue that you might encounter as a city, and certainly almost all of the ones that you would see in with any kind of frequency. And that includes things like municipal finance, like refinancing your debt obligations and using a municipal advisor and providing advice to council if there's outstanding debts that need to be refinanced because conditions are favorable to that. Recently, I did one for pension obligations that saved $4 million in the city of Willows over the next 20 years, and that just closed. We also look at a USDA one that's doing those kind of things. So those passion areas that we each individually have contribute to us being able to deliver a full package of services to the cities that we represent. I also want to touch upon one other question that had come up in the past, and that was, what is your philosophy of your relationship with the cities that you represent? because I'm standing here today putting myself up as your city attorney. So here's my philosophy, and it's very straightforward. I am not a policymaker. Council as a body is a policymaker. They make the determinations. I give options, wise counsel, present the pitfalls if there are pitfalls, present the highlights if there are highlights, give an assessment of the costs and risks and potential liabilities that go with any individual sort of course of action. But when council decides that they want to seek a particular course of action, my job is to assist them in fulfilling that to the greatest degree possible with the least amount of risk and with the highest degree of success that I can muster for council as a whole. To do that, I rely on a close partnership and relationship, and a collaborative one, with the city manager. The city manager, as one of the other items firms had mentioned, is sort of here every day. But even though the city manager is here every day and I may not be, I'm in communication with my city managers every day. Every day on a variety of different kinds of issues. We talk, we explore the tensions between different kinds of ideas. So when we talk about representation of a council, understand that for no individual council member do I have an individual relationship that's representative. I may give individual council members guidance on conflicts, which is appropriate. But I work for the council as a body, as a whole. And so it's that collaboration that leads to the greater degrees of success that we've been able to enjoy in our previous representation with councils and cities, counties, special districts all across the state. So, next.
The second question, I believe, was on cannabis experience. And so that would be my expertise. I've written cannabis ordinances for 4 different cities. Some were prohibition, some were regulatory, combined with the development agreement. I am the cannabis program lawyer in Trinity County. Trinity County is one of the Emerald Triangle counties, and for the past 3 years, I have been their program lawyer. I was hired principally to help that county process a comprehensive programmatic EIR for their program, which includes cultivation, manufacturing, everything. I mean, you can imagine up there, being in the Emerald Triangle, they want to have a very robust program. There have been a gazillion questions that I've answered over the course of my 3 years. I was the county counsel in that county some years ago. So I came back because of my expertise in planning and environmental law and cannabis. I am their program lawyer, and I believe that we have all of the experience that you would need to handle any cannabis issue, whether it's how to regulate it, how to handle applications, if there's litigation, if there are environmental questions, we can cover all of that. I believe, and maybe Dave can ask, we had a question about the Brown Act and what will happen if there's, how we'll educate the council on the Brown Act. So Dave?
So the education of a council on a variety of issues like ethics or conflicts or the Brown Act and government transparency and what exceptions to the Brown Act might exist is an ongoing process. This is not something that you just one day say to council, this is how the Brown Act works. Every time there's a meeting, we assess whether there should be some change that makes something, more dealt with more on the public side rather than, say, in a closed session. We also make sure that the agenda adequately describes the items that are going to come before council so the constituents will understand those very clearly. So when I say this is an ongoing basis, this education process happens at the stage where you're creating your agendas and you're putting them in place. It happens as you move forward into the meetings themselves and you address questions, and it happens also, by engaging the public and allowing them to have robust public participation in the meetings on as many of the topics as possible. The only topics that you should be not discussing out in the public are those where there's a critical level of sensitivity, because it's strategically important not to have that discussion in public right off the bat. And there also has to be a defined, obviously narrowly interpreted exception to the Brown Act if you're going to have those conversations in closed session. That's one reason why I really like the format that you've chosen for this city attorney interview. This never happens. We're never up here talking in an interview with all the firms sitting here and all the members of the public and answering your questions. But if you're going to hire a city attorney and they're going to be sitting in the chair, that person better be able to do that conversation in front of the public, because they're going to be there, you know, twice a month or more at the meetings, and they should be able to do this right there in front of you all the time. So this is refreshing. I like it. I think it's interesting and novel, unusual, but I'm really proud of you that you've chosen to do that and that your council has decided to move forward that way. So ongoing education, not only that though, we do Brown Act and government transparency trainings, and we keep everybody sort of up to speed. In our proposal, you'll see that we have provided for 3 included trainings annually. Those would be your normal AB 1825 prevention of harassment trainings, also the AB 1234 trainings, and then Brown Act and government transparency training as well. Those are typically, although the council might choose other things amongst those or other options, such as Peace Officer Bill of Rights training or some kind of labor relations training. We can accommodate those needs. The big 3, though, are Brown Act, ethics, and harassment prevention. So, next question.
The next question was a Fort Park question from our treasurer. So she's trying to remind us of law school with these intricate, detailed, multi-part questions, which I think all of us appreciate. I think you had a question as to how we will bill our tasks. And so we have what we call the all-encompassing retainer. We don't like to separate things into this is a special service, this is a general service. We believe we can give you all of your monthly advisory services. And we do that by basically, we have a lot of experience doing this with our cities, and we have a feel for how many hours we need. But we have the true-ups at 6 months and a year to allow us to adjust. And so if we're behind in some hours, we'll come up. But equally, if we've overestimated the hours, we'll come down. So it works both ways. But our firm philosophy, we feel like there's too much of an incentive for firms to push everything to a special service and to define things away from the general service. And we found that creates budgeting difficulties for our clients. So we do it differently. We'll give you a monthly retainer, and that will be solid as long as we can have those 2 true-ups. So in that situation, you don't have to worry about, we'll still record by hour because we have to, and we like to do that. And we'll record to the 10th of an hour, so every 6 minutes. The question is about travel. So another thing we do is we just do a flat percentage for all of our admin. And we've also found that this is good for our clients, it's good for us. So, I mentioned that I'm the managing partner. I look at spreadsheets and all kinds of intricate reports, and we try to figure out what our cost of doing business is. And that includes our cost of driving everywhere and fuel, and we actually have 2 company cars. We found that that's one way that we can actually save on travel costs as opposed to paying at the IRS rate. So we really work hard, but we use our all-encompassing retainer model, and then we have a flat administrative fee, and that gives you certainty and that gives us certainty. So that's how we like to do it, and that's our model. And then the question about the invoices, we absolutely would love for members of the public to receive our invoices. We believe that's part of the transparency. The city attorney, whether it's an in-house city attorney or whether it's a contract city attorney, people should have a right to know how much they're spending on legal services. There are a few situations where we would have to redact the bills just because we can't provide information that would disclose attorney-client information, but we know how to do that. I think all of us here know how to do that because it's part of our situation. So we're absolutely happy. And we hope that you're giving our invoices out. And I don't know, ma'am, if there were any other questions. Thank you. And then Dave, there was a question about trainings and there was a question about conflict of interest and what will we do to make sure that the council is trained so there's no conflict of interest. Okay, that was yours, sir. So Dave, you want to cover that?
Well, again, it's very similar to the question that we had on Brown Act training and government transparency, conflict of interest sets of rules. But I think your question goes further, and that is, what active participation are we going to have in making sure that the council understands their conflict obligations? And that comes from dialogue, regular dialogue, having access to council members, understanding where their conflicts may lie, for example, where they work, what their property holdings are, understanding when they may have a pecuniary interest in a financial interest in an item that might come before council, and they understand how to disclose that to the public, how to recuse themselves, and also that they can't not only be participating in making the decision, but sometimes can't be involved in any of the conversations about that topic whatsoever. And so, like I said, with the Brown Act training and government transparency, repetition, ongoing training, it's a continuation, a continual process. So our focus would be on making sure that we do that on a continuous basis. The other advantage to doing that is that as the rules and laws change with respect to conflicts of interest, and they do change. For example, the 500-meter radius rule has changed over time. We are able to capture those changes as they happen and make sure that your council is current on their knowledge about how conflicts occur.
So next we had a series of text message questions that the city clerk gave us. One of them I think was just answered, and that was, how would we encourage the council to act ethically? And I'll look at Madam Clerk, and I think Mr. Ritchie, Dave just answered that. As far as Spanish, we do not have anyone who speaks Punjabi. We have two partners who do speak Spanish. That neither Mr. Ritchie nor I do, but we do have two partners at our firm that do speak Spanish. There was a question, and I'll ask Mr. Ritchie, there was a question about investigations and what would we do to make sure there's transparency in investigations? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I think I recall the question this way, and it had to do with if there's an investigation into some form of misconduct of an elected council member, which is very different. And I have an experience level in this because I do employee investigations fairly often. There's a difference here between what happens in an employment investigation and what happens in an investigation of an elected council member. So elected council members, the league has a very interesting publication, came out a couple of months ago about this very topic and how sensitive it can be. Elected council members can be subject to investigations because they're held to the same policies, rules, and procedural standards of those employees or vendors or contractors that you have in the city. The difficulty with having your city attorney investigate a sitting council member is that we are supposed to be working collaboratively with your council as a body and your city manager. Almost every time you have a council member that needs to be investigated for some allegation of wrongdoing, and I'll say in an allegation because you don't know the facts until the outcome has been investigated, that really almost every time should be done by a neutral, independent, outside investigator every single time. And here's why. Because it keeps your city attorney away from any kind of political morass that might occur as a result of, a sense that they're, picking on a council member or they have some kind of harbored bias or something of that sort. I know this to be true because I have just finished having a council member investigated, and I made this decision already, just very recently, since March of this year, to use a qualified, neutral, outside investigator who is experienced in investigating in public agencies. When you do those investigations, your city attorney should be completely hands-off, meaning all the way through that process, it should be entirely neutral and entirely independently conducted. When you get those results back, you'll have factual findings, and council will have policies about how they are going to act in between each other. It's very different than if you get an employment investigation back and you're going to take an employment action. With the council members, they're accountable to the voters. They're not accountable to me. I don't fire your council members. And I often don't encourage other council members to engage in things like censuring and things like that. That's up to council if they want to do that and if it's provided for in their policies. But the voters speak. The voters elect your council members. It's not within my purview to unelect them on my fiat. I don't do that kind of thing. When you have an employment situation and it subjects the city to liability because an employee has engaged in misconduct, that's a different kind of situation. So I think it's very pertinent to look at these situations and see the difference between them. Not every investigation is the same. Certainly investigations of elected members, you have options, right? If there are serious instances of misconduct, they can be referred to the grand jury, and the grand jury can decide whether they've engaged in misconduct that makes them unfit for office. Council could do that if they found that there was serious misconduct. Often, the voters just speak, and that's the way that it should be.
And Madam Clerk, I think there might have been one more text question, and I didn't get that.
So the last question was, can and should council members become involved in personnel matters, like direct staff to do things?
So I think that this question really is a bigger question than just talking about personnel matters. So you have a hierarchy in your city where council will hire your city manager, and your city manager is responsible for operational and managerial decisions with respect to the city's day-to-day operations, and that includes personnel management. Council members, on the other hand, are responsible for setting policy and asking the city manager to ensure that your architecture of city staff follows that policy to the greatest extent that they can. So as a starting point, it's generally not appropriate for policymakers to stray into the operational side, and operational side people should never be straying into policy and substituting their judgment for your elected members. Those are two different kinds of roles and functions that we have within the city. The reason you want to separate those roles a little bit is because it allows us to make better decisions for you, the public, right? Policy on one side, execution and operations on the other side of that. Obviously, we have to talk, but generally speaking, it's not a great solution to have individual council members being directly involved in personnel matters at the city. Certainly, a council member might have a complaint. They bring forward a complaint, that be investigated and dealt with. But in terms of being directly involved, it would be something I generally would discourage.
Then after that, we went to council questions. Councilmember Moran, you had some questions. One was a bad experience. And about 10 years ago, one of my councils was doing a performance evaluation of the city manager, and we gave that, and then we went into a discussion about whether there should be a salary adjustment. It's a big no-no. The Brown Act says in a performance evaluation, you cannot discuss compensation. You're supposed to do that separately through a different procedure and exception under the Brown Act, but we did it. And it got out to the media, and we got hammered, rightfully so. And I was a city attorney. And I vowed at that point, I mean, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have let that happen. It was late in the night. I can make every excuse under the sun. But they took a big beating publicly from the press, from the public. We had people coming in afterwards. It involved the city manager's compensation. It put him in an unfortunate position. He's a fantastic city manager. And it really brought a real ugliness to our city that we hadn't had, and I took responsibility for that. And I have never let that happen ever again. So that's a situation where I just fell below the standard, and I saw what that did to my council. I mean, I could take making mistakes and people coming at me, that's fine. But when they come after people that I work for, then I take that personally. So that's an example. You also had a question about if we have a different interpretation. I think you mentioned the DA, so were you referring to the district attorney?
Well, in this case, somewhat yes. But also to, like as the previous gentleman referred to, also to the city manager. because the city managers might have a different interpretation based on their experience, but at the same time, in the long run, that might have been the wrong interpretation, like in this case that you presented, that could potentially lead to something bigger regarding legal issues.
So ultimately, our job is to make sure, I sort of look at it as, imagine us in the dark and on a path in the forest or wherever. I don't want to just shine a flashlight in front of us. I want to shine a lantern so we see everything. That's ultimately our job. And we don't, but your city manager is the person that you hire to actually administer your city. So I think it's very important that we not try to usurp his role. And our job is to provide that lantern and be with him and walk with him and to shine that lantern. But at the end of the day, we cannot make decisions. We can't, if it's ultimately his decision, the only thing that we can do is if we get into an ethical territory, then we have reporting obligations where we may have to come to the mayor, we may have to come to the council. That's what we do. Our relationship, we work very hard to have excellent relationships. I look at, your city manager, city attorney, that's your right brain and your left brain. And I mean, those are the two lobes of your brain, basically, when it comes to municipal government. We need to work together. We need to function together. But we also need to not be, we've talked about, we're not a sixth council member. A speaker earlier said that. I wholeheartedly agree. We're also not a city manager, and we have to do our job. And then I have Councilmember Aguilar, challenges to the city. You asked questions about what kind of challenges for your city.
Well, thank you. In my open remarks, I touched upon a few things that I have noted that have been sort of publicized through the city website. First of all, I know that your police department has tried to and has had some success in reducing property crimes in the city. That's very important. You also have efforts to suppress gang activity in the city. We've seen that in other locations with gang task force in like the city of Churchill that we were before, and in many of our cities we have those same kinds of efforts. Also, I know that there is still an ongoing effort to combat some of these property crimes by putting cameras up and fighting against graffiti and things that would tend to create an appearance, an undesirable appearance on some of the city structures. So we're familiar with all of those challenges that you've gone through that are kind of related to law enforcement and code enforcement. Certainly every city has code enforcement challenges here and there. We have a very accomplished expert code enforcement attorney in Sam Emerson, and he's very successful at getting properties cleaned up, and most of the time finding ways to ensure that either there's a special assessment lien to assist you. So we would look to your city code to make sure that it's optimal for your code enforcement and those kinds of things to start with, and then move forward. I also noted that the city had annexed an area for future development. So I think that economic development and housing is obviously another one. Merced County is one of the worst positioned counties in the state for affordable housing, but affordable housing, it can be a scary term, right? Some people think affordable housing, we need to champion it, but then when it comes down to it, they don't really know how to do it or where to put it or what to do. I am the general counsel for Housing Authority, and I also work for the Housing Authority in the County of Sacramento, handling a lot of their litigation work, especially in unlawful detainer and things like that, suppressing violence in the communities that they have that are multifamily housing. So housing and your housing element and how housing is going to happen drive some of your economic development activities as well, because you're not an attractive community to economic development unless you have residents, and the residents need housing, and it has to be affordable. So those are things that I see as major challenges, and I think that your city has expressed some of those already in your website. I also want to note, I think I'm at the end of the questions, if I'm right, am I?
Those were the last questions that we recall.
I just wanted to close and note that, we really do look forward to serving your community. If I'm selected as your city attorney, you'll get direct, concise, fast, and effective advice from me. I don't beat around the bush. You get an answer when you need an answer. I note that I think our relationship would be a great one. I look forward to working with you. I know that you have a 100th anniversary with a celebration coming on September 11th of 2022. I look forward to being there with you and being part of your community as well. And so we thank you for giving us the time to present. We'll take any other questions at your discretion.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Go ahead.
Good afternoon or evening. My question is, you spoke in regards to a retainer, a monthly retainer.
Yes.
And so my question is, I know you had a set times or hours, I believe you were mentioning something about either you're having to either go up or down versus what? And so my main question is, if you have a retainer, is it a monthly retainer? And if we do not use it, is it rolled over or is it automatically every month the same amount regardless?
I'm going to let Derek answer this because he is the managing partner.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you.
It's a monthly retainer, and the way it works is we'll go 6 months, and we'll see how it works, and then those 6 months we'll get the flat rate every month, and then if the number goes down, then we'll adjust, and over the course of the contract, we'll be at a equilibrium, so to speak. So that's the purpose. We don't, if we say we're going to do 55 hours a month and we do 45 hours a month and our price point is based on 55 hours, then, over time, we shouldn't keep capturing those 10 hours that we're not doing. That's the purpose, that we try to get past that. So, but we need that 6 months and we need that year to really figure out what it's actually going to take. We have ideas based on all the cities that we represent and the places where we've done this, but we need that 6 months to a year. So, it's possible for those first few months, we may come in a little, we may do fewer hours than we anticipated, but that'll go down.
Any other questions from the public? Anybody on the phone? Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
I do. His remarks regarding time make sense. When Derek said you only allow 5 minutes, he mentioned later that they bill by 6 minutes, so he's hoping that time is 7 so he can bill for 12 minutes. I get that. But the question I have is, there's an old story about a mathematician, and a engineer and a lawyer. So the boss asked him, what's 2 plus 2? The mathematician goes 4. The engineer goes between 3.9 and 4.01. Then he asks the lawyer gets up, closes the door, comes down and says, what do you want it to be? So the question I have for the law firms is, they said that they work for the council. I get it. They also work for the city manager to some degree, not directly, we understand. But in essence, they also work for the public at large, and I believe. So each firm has said that it is our job to make sure that the council can move forward with what they want to do. The question is, if there's a difference of opinion between the public and the council, does the law firms look towards finding a way just so the council can accomplish this task, or they are looking for the general good? So that's actually a very difficult question, and I realize it's very difficult to answer as well. But where does that duty lie to? Does it lie to the council or to the public at large?
It's really not a difficult question to answer because it's not really a binary choice. It's not an either or. The members of the public and their comments and their concerns with respect to the decision-making process need to be part of the deliberations that your council goes through, and they need to be considered and part of the matters that they do. So that's why it's so important that we observe the Brown Act, right? Because that's the key part that allows for public participation in the decision-making that your elected members will be doing. The city attorney's role in that is not to make the decision in favor of the citizens versus the council. The council gives us direction. We don't make the decisions. The role is to make sure that the public has the proper opportunity to participate in the decision-making process and that your voices are allowed by council to be heard, even if it's a criticism, even if it's a criticism of me, right? So I am not without occasions when somebody has sought to criticize something that I said or something that I decided or some guidance that I gave. And, that's part of the role that we serve. Council members, though, make the decision. They give us direction. That's why I'm saying it's not a hard question to answer. It's not a binary choice. We help council facilitate your voice, participatory voice in government. That's what you're asking.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to council. Any further questions at this time? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Council,
you.
Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it.
So this time we'll move on to our third group, presentation by Lozano Smith.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, City Council, City Manager. My name is Travis Cochran. I'm with the law firm Lozano Smith, and here with me tonight is Jim Sanchez. First of all, I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. We understand the importance of this process and the significance of the decision that you're making tonight, and certainly the importance of your time. And again, we just appreciate the opportunity to come before you and meet you and present on behalf of our firm. So briefly regarding Lozano Smith, and I'm going to try to address question number 1 here as well. Lozano Smith started in 1988, a little over 30 years, for the purpose of serving public agencies. We represent school districts, community colleges, cities, counties, special districts, all throughout the state of California. We have 8 offices and a little over 100 attorneys currently. And I know there's been a little bit of the big firm bashing tonight. And while I don't necessarily consider ourselves a big firm, we operate regionally and really focus in on the communities with respect to our individual offices. And the other thing I would say is it allows us to become experts in certain areas and really offer that specific expertise. So as city attorneys, Jim and myself and the other city attorneys in the office, we're generalists. We have to learn about everything that it is that the city does. So we're going to touch upon the Brown Act, land use, public safety, planning and development, everything else. We're going to handle those issues for you. That's sort of our area. And we also have specific niches. Mine's what we call facilities and business. So I do a lot of vendor contracts, contract negotiation, construction. But we also have practice groups within our firms that are made up of a number of attorneys. And they will specialize in different areas: labor and employment, litigation, public safety, governance, lots of those other niche areas. So again, full service firm. So anything that Jim or I can't handle on a day-to-day basis in that sort of general municipal law area, we have a bench and depth of expertise within our firm where it's like, hey, I've never seen this before, but we've got a whole host of attorneys that probably specialize in that specific issue that are there to back us up if it's ever necessary. So real quickly regarding our philosophy, I think it could sort of be summed up in 3 different ways. The first is we're a solution-oriented firm. Our role and our philosophy is to listen first. We want to hear what it is that you have to say. We want to understand and listen to your priorities, your needs, your culture, what it is that you are trying to accomplish with respect to each individual task. And then we're going to take that information and we're going to provide you tailored solutions. We want to give you all of the practical options. We understand that the law says what it says. Sometimes it's subject to interpretation, but there's usually a law regarding X issue. But instead of just saying the law says X, we're going to provide, here's what the law says, but here's everything you can do within the spectrum of what the law says. Here's option A, here's option B, here's option C. These are the risks, and these are the different issues that might arise with your different options, but we are going to give you that gamut of solutions to help address whatever issue may arise. We're also consistent. We believe that you as public servants have the right to competent, reliable, straightforward, and easy to understand legal advice. and we provide that. And we do it without surprises. We're going to offer that advice consistently to each of you. It's going to be in a transparent manner. You're all going to receive the same information. You're all going to receive the same same solutions, the same information, and the same representation from us. Again, we don't want you to be surprised because somebody comes to you and says, hey, I talked to the city attorney and they gave me this information, or this is what we're going to do. We represent you as a collective body, and we make sure that our advice and our representation of you each is consistent. And the other thing I would say is we understand our role. We are not the decision makers. We are the decision implementers. We take the feedback that you give, the direction and the policy that you set, and we help implement that to the best of our abilities. We're never going to replace your judgment with our own. We are there to work with your team. You are the elected officials. You are the representatives of the public. You have placed your faith in the city manager, and he has placed his faith in the staff that he has hired. And we work with that team collaboratively to implement the policy that you set, but we are never going to tell you what to do, and we're not going to say that we know better how to run your community than you do. So regarding experience, I am currently the city attorney for the city of Greenfield, which is a community of about 20,000 people in a South Monterey County. I don't want to say it's the same as the city of Livingston because every city is unique, and I fundamentally believe that, but there are a lot of similarities with demographics, statistics, location, being rural. I also serve as the general counsel for the Arroyo Seco Groundwater Sustainability Agency, which is a groundwater agency that the city of Greenfield and a few other jurisdictions in the area have created. And I also serve as deputy city attorney or assistant city attorney in support of the other city attorneys in our office. And with that, I'm going to let Jim introduce himself as well.
So, Council, as Travis said, it's a pleasure to be here in front of all of you and the community as well. I do believe in transparency as a city attorney for over 34 years in cities ranging in size from the city of Salinas, the city of Fresno, and then just most recently as the city attorney for Sacramento, and now having the privilege of working with smaller cities. I'm the city attorney in Firebaugh currently. Did serve time as the city attorney in the city of Chowchilla, just down the road here over the last few years. And so what I can tell you is my role is one of public service. I've done it in-house and now on the outside on contract. I understand the needs of my cities and the councils that represent the people of those cities. I also understand agricultural communities. I was born and raised in Fresno, serving agricultural communities most of my life from the time I was young, picking grapes in the Central Valley here in Fresno area, to, as I mentioned, service with the different cities that I've had the pleasure to work with. One of the other things that I think is important in these kinds of decisions is that you understand that your city attorney is a listener. He or she will be one to say, what is it that you're telling me? What's important to you? What is the big picture here? And then with that information and also recognizing the context, you've got due process issues. There's a lot of concern in the community, and rightfully so, about transparency, Brown Act, Public Records Act. The city attorney's role in all of those areas is to serve as a part of the team, but also a check and balance. There are times when my city councils have not liked some of the information that I've given them because the law doesn't allow them to go exactly where they want to go. But my commitment has always been, I'll tell you what the law tells you, but I will also give you options to get you as close as you can to where you need to be. You will always get an option from us in terms of legal opportunities available to get you as close to where you need to be as we can. The other thing is, in the check and balance, the due process, there will be occasions when there'll be disagreements between the city staff, the city attorney, or individual council members, the city manager, or the city attorney, or the community and the elected. That's the process of democracy, and there's nothing wrong with that. The issue is, how do you work through that as a community? How do you get to a transparent and credible decision that's also defensible, The council needs to be able to know that when their decisions are made, that decision will stand. People coming in to invest in the community also need to know that they will be treated fairly. Residents in the community need to know that they will be heard and considered in the process. And those are all critical things related to due process, and that's where the city attorney can shine. And in the time that I have worked as a city attorney, that's been critical to my interaction with my city councils. And ultimately, Travis indicated our philosophy. The reason I joined this firm 4.5 years ago was because they had the same philosophy that I did. We look to serve our communities, to ensure due process, and then ultimately to be the advocates for the decisions that the collective body of elected officials have made. And we do that well. And so we look forward to the opportunity. We're excited to be here, and I guess we're ready to walk through some of the questions now that you posed to us.
Thank you. Did you guys get an opportunity to write down some of those questions?
Yes, absolutely. And so I think I addressed the in-house expertise issue earlier, but essentially we are a full-service firm. All of our city attorneys are well-versed in all aspects of municipal law, and then we also have individual practice groups that really hone in on certain niche areas of public agency law. Regarding cannabis, the city of Greenfield, some of you may know, but it was sort of at the cutting edge, ahead of the game in cannabis regulation and allowing cannabis business operations within the city. They have, I think, over $500 million worth of cannabis investment in the city currently. We help them through all of their cannabis issues with respect to regulation and everything else. They just completed construction and now operation of a $200 or $300 million facility, and a couple years ago finished a $100 million facility. And we walked them through all of those issues. And I know Jim has experience with some of his Central Valley clients with respect to.
Yes, we had similar experience working through the city of Fireball. We drafted the cannabis ordinance for the city of Fireball and several other Central Valley cities, and have implemented that and have moved through the city through that process. And as was described here, it can be a complicated process. You again identify due process, property interests, and those kinds of things. And you have to do it right the first time. If you don't, you will experience some problems. So we're confident that we can certainly meet those needs in this community.
Yeah, I know one of the specific questions that was asked is what are the issues that we're seeing? And some of the issues I'm seeing currently really are with respect to, now that we have people in operation, the industry, as you'll come to learn if you get familiar with it, it's very fluid. There's licensees, there's property owners, there's developers, there's people that run the operation, and it not always jives with the regulatory system that you have in place, the development agreements, the municipal code, the conditional use permits. And so you really have to stay on top of who these players are, how they're operating, and those are a lot of the issues that we're working through currently, which is who's actually in that facility, who's paying the taxes, who's running it, and everything else. I think the next question was regarding the Brown Act. And I would just say that, as many of the other attorneys have said, it's ongoing education. The Brown Act is not something that we expect you all to know like the back of your hand. That is why you have retained a city attorney. We are the experts in the Brown Act. But it is our job to continually educate you, and that's going to be through various trainings. We also have a Brown Act handbook that our firm has prepared that we always provide to our clients free of cost. But it's also continuous, like, small bits of training. So one of the things that I want my counsel to learn, and my other staff members, the clients that I work with, is sort of the issue spotting. It's, do I have that alarm bell that's going off in the back of my head? Is there a potential issue here? Because I always want to anticipate those sorts of things. So that's what I try to implore upon the agencies that I work with, is I give them enough knowledge to sort of understand the issues, so when they see something or feel something wrong, we can talk about that and we can identify potential Brown Act issues long before they occur.
I think the issues of ethics and the process, the due process, really involved, and people have mentioned education, but it's beyond that. It's education in ensuring that the culture of the organization has bought into and holds each other accountable, as well as the attorney. We can flag, but we need the cooperation of the organization to implement and engage. The city manager is obviously key with the staff to make sure that at the staff level, there's that commitment to transparency and due process. And working together, our firm has had a very good success rate with our clients in terms of ensuring defensibility of decisions and the credibility of what the council ultimately decides. And I think that's key to what we do.
Jim, do you want to touch on, I think next one I have is travel costs and invoices.
Yeah, so we work with our clients to make sure that how we charge, how we bill is not only transparent, and there were some questions about transparency, and like the other firms had indicated, we too recognize that it is a public record. There are instances within the invoice where there may be some attorney-client privilege and information, and that would be redacted. But yes, it's a transparent document, and it's something that we are comfortable working to ensure that is available to residents or those individuals that would have need with the city. The other thing is in terms of travel, you're going to have the benefit of service from both our Fresno office and the Sacramento office if you select us. Our travel would likely be tailored to what your needs are. Do you want us here on a regular basis with regular office hours? If so, and that starts to be more than a couple of times a month, then yes, we would probably have to work out a special arrangement with travel costs. We would not see that as an obstacle on our side. We would do what you all need. Again, an example, the city of Fireball is a fairly small city, just under 10,000. The budget there is very sensitive to those kinds of things, and we've been able to work with them to meet the needs, minimize travel costs, do what needs to be done to keep the budget intact, and they've been very satisfied with how we've served them from a cost standpoint.
The other thing I would just say about travel too is it's hard to compare. It seems like an apples to apples issue, but it's almost an apples to oranges issue because all rates are factored a little bit differently. And I would just say that in addition to what Jim said about working out what is most specific to your needs, our rates, I believe, are also extremely competitive. And so while there might be some travel costs included, when you look at the overall hourly rate, I think it's very competitive amongst other firms who might have a different model for doing it.
Some of the other questions that we saw, should the council direct the staff? That is a million-dollar question in the municipal practice and how cities function. This city is under the council manager form of government, and as was previously described, you, the city council, as a majority, decide who the city manager is. The city manager then is given the deference to operate the day-to-day staff operations of the city, and you all make the policy decisions. But with that overview, you also recognize that information is a lifeblood of good decision-making, and you as legislators need to have access to good information. And so there is that need to make sure that there's exchange of information. While you should not be in the mode of directing staff under the city manager, you certainly, from a policy standpoint, can engage in everything from the budget that's to be used, the positions that would implement actions, and the types of actions, the policy actions that you would like to see implemented on behalf of this community. That's why you all are elected. And from our standpoint, we recognize those rules, and we do what we can to make sure we are a part of the process in a positive way. We're not obstacles in that process. But at the end of the day, there will be differences of opinion. And when those differences of opinion arise, how does the city and the culture work through that? Our position is there's always going to be transparency. None of the council will be without information, nor will the city manager. There will be uniformity of information going out. There's a commitment that none of you will be surprised. Now, we cannot commit that you will always be happy with the information, but you will all have it equally, you will have it available to you, and you will have options that will allow you to accomplish the goals that you desire. Another question that was laid out was, does the city attorney work for the council, the residents? And I think my experience has been, ultimately, the city attorney does work as appointed by the city council. However, the city attorney has to be aware of the residents' needs, the residents' concerns, and working with the city manager, always laying out options that consider all of those. Additionally, the city attorney has to be ensuring that the process is being followed, so people are given the opportunity to be heard. And at the end of the day, the decision that comes from that, again, is credible and defensible. And that's the way the process is intended to work. That's the democracy side of this. Another question was investigation transparency. I've had the opportunity, I guess is what I would call it, to walk through a number of these types of investigations involving elected officials. I agree that the city attorney is not the person that should be conducting those investigations. The city attorney is certainly going to give legal advice into what should be done and provide that advice to the city manager and to the council. But at the end of the day, it should be an outside investigator to ensure the conflict issues are not presented as some of the other firms had previously described and walked through. And again, credibility and transparency of that process is going to be key in ensuring the effectiveness of the end results of that. I'm looking through anything else.
I've got them all
Yeah.
written down if you want to. Just let me see what we've checked off here. You know, Jim just mentioned this, but I'll elaborate a tiny bit more, is how we address conflicts of interest. And again, this goes back to ongoing education. And it's arming you with information to make you aware of the issues as they come up. Similar to the Brown Act, I don't expect you to be an expert in the Political Reform Act that governs ethics and conflicts of interest. It's very dense law, very complicated. Again, that's why you hire the city attorneys. But what we want to do and what we try to do is give you the information to continually educate you, so when you see those issues, when you see, I have a financial interest in this, or I have a potential financial interest, or what my family members do, or I live within X feet of a development, you see that before we ever get to the council meeting. We can discuss it, we identify it, and we address it long ahead of the time. Because what is frustrating for all parties, the city attorney, the city council, and the public, is to get into a city council meeting and somebody to realize, oh, I might have a conflict. And then you're scrambling to address that. The public thinks, oh, they're not being transparent, and the city attorney is caught off guard. And so really identifying those issues ahead of time, anticipating them, is really what we like to do, and we try to work with council in helping you address that. Regarding speaking of Spanish, English is unfortunately the only language I speak. Jim,
Puedo entender, pero necesitará practicar más. So maybe there's an opportunity here, but that's where we are.
do you know if Jessica speaks?
Yes.
Yeah, and real quickly too, and I meant to address this earlier, one of the other team members listed on our proposal is Jessica Mejorado out of our Fresno office also, and she is currently out on maternity leave, also excited for this opportunity, but she also is fluent in Spanish as well. And there was a question regarding transparency as well, and what we do to promote transparency. And I think Jim has addressed this, and a number of the other attorneys have as well, and I think it's great responses, and I think ours is similar. But I would want to note that there are times where transparency is just not allowed, or we cannot be transparent, and I know that can cause frustration, but we will always be as transparent as we can be, legally speaking. But there is a reason that you have the opportunity to go into closed session. There is a reason that our communications with you are subject to the attorney-client privilege, a privilege that you hold that we can't waive without your waiver. And so we just want you to understand that while we promote transparency, we promote public input and really collaborative participation between elected officials, staff, and the public, and your city attorney's office, there are some things, quite frankly, that have to remain confidential. And we will certainly advise you of those as we go along. And that requires an element of trust. There has to be some level of trust between your community and you as the elected officials who they have elected and put their faith into. But there needs to be a mutual understanding that there are certain things that cannot be said out in public, and it's really to protect your interest. If you are negotiating a contract for a purchase of property, we don't want to have that discussion out in the open, because then the property owner or the buyer or whoever it is going to know exactly what's going on. So there is that give and take with respect to transparency. But again, we will do what we can to help you be as transparent as possible, but there has to be that mutual understanding that not everything with respect to the city's business can be conducted out here in the open. And I think the next question was with respect to the city council becoming involved in personnel issues. And
as we talked about at the outset of our presentation, you've got basically a council manager form of government. And as the council has selected the city manager is giving deference on the day-to-day operations. The council's focus on personnel matters would be directly with the city manager. If the city isn't functioning well, the council looks to the city manager and perhaps looks to policy improvements as well to ensure that those changes that need to be made are made. And we certainly would be a part of assisting in that. We understand our role, and my city councils throughout the cities that I've served have appreciated the fact that the city attorney is not an assistant city manager. I'm not a policy maker or policy recommender. What I am is a legal option provider to try and provide creative solutions to the problems that my client faces, and they've appreciated that.
9 up here. Council member, I believe your question was next, and it was bad experience. And I'll just say that, at least from my personal perspective, is at least myself, and I would imagine a number of the attorneys in this room, we always look back on certain issues and say, I wish I would have done that differently. I wish I would have said that differently. I wish I would have not said or said something else. And it's not because we necessarily didn't know the law or screwed something up or acted illegally, but it's because we strive to be perfectionists, a lot of us. We want to represent you to the best of our ability, and if there's ever sort of a shortcoming in that, I think a lot of us take it personally because we are really invested in the cities that we work with, the communities that we work with, and so there is really high expectations set for ourselves. So I think we're constantly thinking of what could I have done differently? How can I improve? How can I do this better in the future? Because again, we are working with you, growing with you, and it's always a bit of self-improvement because again, those really high expectations are set. And I could share personal bad experiences too. There was a situation one time where I received an email and I did not immediately notice that there was a number of people copied on it. And of course I did the classic reply all to a personnel board that was going to hear a personnel matter and said something about the personnel board that was not appropriate to say in that email. And in the immediate fallout, it's frustrating and you feel terrible about those situations. But I think the one thing to take home, and certainly I learned from it, is that there's opportunity for correction. There are very few things in the legal field that are unreversible or unfixable. And sometimes those issues occur, but you fix them, you address them, you be transparent about them, and then we move on and we move forward and we improve. I don't know, Jim, do you want to share a bad experience or you just want to move on from that one?
Well, over 34 years, I've got a number of bad experiences. What I can tell you is that with each one of them, I was able to fix them and we were able to learn from them. There were not repeat instances. That's the good news. But yes, there will be instances with the number of issues that we face where you will have an occasional misstep. But I think our track record is we have not been replaced as a city attorney in our cities. Each city that I've been at has wanted me to stay when the time came for me to move on. And that, I think, says a lot about the relationship. It's not that I'm perfect, it's that I find a way to make things work for the community in the ways that their culture and their decision-making opportunities and needs present. So I think with that, we've touched the bases and we're open for questions from the council. Or...
Thank you.
Yeah, the last two questions I had written down, and if you want to address them both, different interpretations of the law, and then challenges we see.
I'll go back to a comment that somebody made at the beginning of the meeting about attorneys and what's the engineer and the other, I believe it was an engineer and an attorney and one other professional. And at the end of the day, the joke is, hey, it's whatever you want it to be. From our standpoint, it's not whatever you want it to be. It's what the law will allow you to do to ensure a credible decision. And so I think we will have occasions where you may hear differing opinions from other attorneys, but what we tell you is our opinion is one that we can defend and you can rely upon. It will be credible and defensible. Now, there may be instances where we have disagreement with the city manager. I've had many instances in working with very good city managers where we've had legitimate disagreements. The commitment on my part in those instances is we go forward, we agree to disagree whatever the specific issue is, we lay out where we are, we understand that, and then we present it to the council so that the council can have an opportunity to decide those disagreements, what policy is best, what amount of risk is the community willing to accept. And from that standpoint, I've had instances where I've made a recommendation that was more conservative. The manager wanted to go further. The council said, we believe we need to go further. And I was the one in court defending that decision down the road. And I became as strong an advocate as I could in that kind of situation because that's our role. For the community here, we've heard a number of them. Code enforcement is a challenge in just about any community in this day and age. I've always been one to look at creative code enforcement solutions. In the city of Salinas, when I arrived there, we had a gang problem in certain parts of the community. And at that time, that was back in the mid-90s, there was a case out of the city of San Jose that had just been decided, allowing for civil gang injunctions to be put in certain parts of the community in limited instances. I took that to council and indicated to council that here's an opportunity. Some parts of the community are not going to like it because it can appear to be an infringement upon individual liberties. But at the end of the day, we walked the council through that. They wanted to do that, accepted the risk for us. They took some criticism for it, but it was effective. And that given part of the community received a lot of benefit from the standpoint of a reduced criminal gang activities. And so we look to creative solutions from a code enforcement standpoint. In the city of Sacramento, I had a division that actually dealt with what we call Justice for Neighbors, a program where we had code attorneys who actually were going out to given parts of the neighborhood, meeting with community representatives to talk about how the resources of the city's code enforcement can be used to help where they are. And we found that to be an effective way, again, in a larger city, but an effective way of hearing the community and tailoring the code enforcement efforts to those unique needs of the community. So I think code enforcement is an issue. Economic development, again, lifeblood of the budget for a community. You have annexations underway, some land use opportunities. Those are things that I have actually worked both sides of the fence on. I was a county council doing land use back in the 1980s. So I saw both sides of that as a city attorney and as a county council, and I understand county government. I understand how to connect the dots to get a city where they need to be to advance economic development. I was the attorney who was appointed in Sacramento to help the downtown revitalization with the Golden One Center. We had 7 lawsuits that challenged that. We were effective, got it done. It's set up and it's been running for the last 7 years now, and been effective as a way of helping revitalize the downtown in Sacramento. We bring that kind of resource to you as an opportunity to help the city look at unique and creative ways to grow.
Yeah, and with that, I think we've addressed all of the questions. Unless there's any additional ones.
Any additional questions from the public at this time? Anybody on the phone? Okay, thank you. I'll bring it back to council if council has any additional questions at this time. Thank you so much for
Hey,
presentation.
Council, I would just say thank you again for the opportunity. Myself, Jim, and Jessica come as a team, but you would have certainly the bench and the depth of our firm. We're responsive. You would have our direct contact information. You're not going to get passed around, call somebody, not be able to get a hold of us. And I think we would bring a lot of value to the city.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we're going to go ahead and move on to our fourth and final presentation by Elishire and Winder LLP.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council, and thank you for all the members of the public who stayed so late this evening to listen to a bunch of attorneys talk about stuff. So we really appreciate that, and I think that really reflects the community involvement that's involved here. My name is Shannon Chaffin. I'm a partner in Elishire and Winder. Mr. Roy Santos is actually overseas right now and is appearing by phone at 2 a.m. his time in order to call in, and I believe, Roy, were you successfully able to call in?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. I just wanted to take an opportunity, even though I was overseas, to say, introduce myself and say that it's an honor to be considered for this position. I'm going to defer to Shannon, given the internet limitations. I'm sitting about 100 yards from a glacier right now, so I don't have that good of a reception, but I did want to make sure to thank the council and be present here tonight while this decision is being made and while our firm is being presented to council.
So thank you, council, very much, and the public very much for your flexibility. It's not every day that something like this happens, but we wanted to make sure that Roy was here and you could ask him any questions if you had any. So the big question is, who are we? We are Elishire and Winder, or A&W is the easy way to say that. A&W is a full-service law firm that started in 2003, and we only represent public agencies. We believe that we are the perfect size and have the background and expertise that would fit perfectly with the needs of the community. While other law firms will sometimes say, hey, we have X number of attorneys who do public entity law. If you look a little bit closer, a lot of it's schoolwork or educational law, and then often cities are kind of a side business that goes along. Elishire and Winder is not like this. We are passionate about public entity law. We only represent public agencies, and our primary representation is municipal law. All of our 45 to 50 attorneys are municipal law attorneys, so we have a great depth of expertise and a team that is available to the City Council. Because of our size, this allows us to specialize in various areas that you normally wouldn't get with smaller law firms. So, for example, we do public finance, eminent domain, CEQA, cannabis, code enforcement, things like community choice aggregation, which is basically setting up your own electrical company instead of PG&E that's run by the city, oil and gas law, water law, and much, much more. And this is a part of our reflection of the broader services that we offer. Now, I know that the council has this information, I hope you don't mind, but I would like just to outline for the community very quickly this type of services we do provide. And those are the Brown Act, cannabis regulations, CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act, civil rights and First Amendment, conflicts of interest, contracts and public construction, education law, we do that as well, elections, eminent domain and takings, environmental and toxics, franchising, telecommunications, joint power authorities, labor and employment, land use and zoning. I hope you don't mind if I speed up here because the list is still long. Law enforcement and nuisance abatement, that's code enforcement, litigation including appeals, mining, police fire, tort claims, and governmental immunity, Propositions 26 and 218 rate setting, public finance, public law, Public Records Act, real property acquisition and disposition, rent control, successor agency, housing, and water law. So we have the full list. Those are just the practice areas that we have. And then within those practice areas, you have the attorneys who have further subspecialties. So we have basically everything you need, except if you plan on declaring Chapter 9 bankruptcy for your city, which I don't think is on the board. We would suggest that you would go out for something like that. But other than that, this is one-stop shopping. Now, why is that important? There's a couple reasons why that's important. I think the one, in my mind, the highest reason is accountability. You deserve to have accountability from your city attorney. You deserve to have one-stop shopping. If you have to send out work to someone else and they mess up, then you have your city attorney and that person pointing to each other as to who is responsible. As a city council, as a city manager, you need to know where the buck stops. You need to have that expertise at your fingertips, and you need to have accountability. That also includes accountability for budgets and expenses. Instead of saying, well, why is this outside counsel so much? How are we able to address that? Why are they charging this and disputing that, going through the process to dispute it? If you have a question, the very easy thing to do is to pick up the phone and call the city attorney, and it's resolved. It's one-stop shopping, and it's accountability. So this kind of aligns with our philosophy as a firm. We, as a firm, want to give quality, timely advice. As been said before, and I 100% agree with these other candidates as well, city attorney should not be your sixth council member. The city attorney is not elected. The city attorney is not chosen by the community. The city attorney's role is to give legal advice, to give options, to develop solutions, and to work closely with the city manager and the city council to come to a resolution to be able to move the city forward. So in this regard, I'd like to briefly introduce Roy, who you heard on the phone calling in from overseas, and again, appreciate you, Roy, making that 2 a.m. phone call. Roy Santos is from our Fresno office and is being proposed as a city attorney. He's been named as a rising star by the Super Lawyers magazine. That's a really big thing for attorneys. We like to give each other awards, but apparently he's in the top percentile, so that's something that I wanted to mention. He has extensive experience advising municipalities throughout the state, and his practice focuses on all aspects of representing public agencies, including the Brown Act, cannabis, rate setting, labor and employment, civil and criminal code enforcement, government claims act, and development agreements, and more. He is the city currently serving as the city attorney for King City and the assistant city attorney for many other cities, including, I believe, the city of Madera just down the street as well. Just briefly, as far as my background, I'm being proposed as part of the team as the assistant city attorney. I grew up on a farm where I learned the wonderful experience of what it was like to work in the fields, hot, sandy, insects, hornets, you name it, I was there. I decided to go into a different occupation. Obviously did not make a good choice, but you know, here we are today. So as part of that, I have an understanding of what agricultural communities are like, the challenges that you have, the role of how, for example, Forster Farms and your large dairy producers may have here as well, even down to the soil type and what that means for your produce that's being done. I have over 2 decades of legal experiences. I represent public agencies throughout the state. That has ranged as far north as El Dorado County to Los Angeles, to far south as Los Angeles County, and everywhere in between. So we have a team approach. Our theory is if you have a labor and employment question, city manager, you should be able to pick up the phone and talk to the labor and employment attorneys. And you should have at least 3 on call in case the first one happens to be on the line somewhere. If you have a cannabis question, well, Roy has an extensive cannabis background as well, but we have what we call the weed team that does everything from enforcement and prohibition to here's how we authorize distribution. So it's the entire spectrum that's there as well. So we have call-out lists. The chief of police, for example, will have a call-out list. Sometimes if you have an officer-involved shooting at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, you need to know who you need to call, and you need to have a list so that poor sergeant that's on the ground knows who to pick up the phone and talk to. That makes a difference. So we actually have people listed on call and emergency contact information just for that purpose. And I'm sure other attorneys here have gotten a phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning, but that is something that we offer as well. So the other thing that we do is we're flexible. Our concept is we need to serve the community. There are times when you have more pressing community needs as to certain areas. For example, if economic development, land use, cannabis, labor and employment law are the type of issues and things that you're focusing on now, we've proposed attorneys to help you meet that particular need. If your needs change over a period of time, we are perfectly comfortable of reorganizing the teams so it most effectively suits your needs. That's the purpose of a team. You have strength through expertise, numbers, and it offers you a depth of service that you would not be able to get anywhere else. So we look forward to serving you as Livingston. We're available for the questions, and I thought I would go through them. But as I got started on the questions, I know one of the questions dealt with cannabis and background. And Roy, if you're on the line, would you mind giving just a brief overview of your cannabis background and expertise?
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. I've experienced ranging from drafting ordinances regulating cannabis to prohibiting cannabis cultivation, both dealing with recreational cannabis and commercial cannabis. I also have experience working on criminal prosecution of municipal code violations for violating the cannabis ordinances. In addition, I've handled administrative appeals relating to administrative fines for illegal cannabis grows, including writs of mandate. So I have extensive experience dealing with cannabis all the way from prohibition to working on dispensaries and manufacturing, cultivation, kind of everything in between.
Thank you so much, Roy. There was also a question as to what expertise we had with regards to personnel and CEQA items. It turns out that my subspecialty is land use and CEQA, including NEPA as well, which is the federal version kind of CEQA. So anything that you want to do with regards to CEQA, I've done it. I just finished up a 750-acre specific plan that was in the sphere of influence that needed to be annexed in, development agreements that went along with that, rezones, pre-annexations, reorganization initiations, municipal service reviews, anything that you need in order to make that work, I'm your guy. I can do it backwards and forwards, and unfortunately probably no more than I really, really want to with regards to the California Environmental Quality Act, but it all works. We also have, as I mentioned before, there was questions about personnel issues and what would be available. The head of our personnel department is Colin Tanner. He's known up and down in state for his labor negotiations and labor and employment issues. He is available for those items. He runs a very crack team. One of the attorneys that we would probably work with as well for the city of Livingston would be Pam Lee, also a very, very good attorney, and she would be available to help assist as needed. With regards to training, there was a question as, well, how do you do training and what do you do with training? Training is key to avoiding litigation and the front page. I say the front page because there's nothing worse as an attorney than getting up in the morning, looking at the front page and looking at it and thinking, oh, I know what I'm going to be doing today, right? Because it's on the front page. So our goal is to help you avoid being a negative treatment on the front page. And part of that is through training, so you at least have those flags available to you, so you know when to pick up the phone and contact the attorney, or you know when you reach out to the city manager and say, hey, I might be close to this project. Am I within that area? And then the city manager and the city attorney can work together in order to make sure that you don't have any surprises, very unpleasant surprises sometimes when you come into the council meetings as well. So we do training on Brown Act, harassment training, ethics. Those are standard. I believe most of the other firms do that as well. We typically do that at reduced or no cost just because we believe that is a very important component. How importantly do we believe in ethics? The public may not have heard of this. I'm sure the city council's heard of the city of Bell. The city of Bell is the poster child for corruption and how things have gone absolutely wrong. It was a small community. They were earning something like $250,000 a year or more for 1-minute meetings. There was a lot of shall we say, unsavory practices going on, and some of the council members are currently serving time. So our firm actually came in and helped clean up the city of Bell. We came in and helped it restore its fiscal stability. At some points, it was only minutes away from not being able to have enough cash on hand to make payroll. It was a very desperate situation for them. And we believe firmly in public transparency and making sure that we serve the communities in a very ethical way. And I would just point to the city of Bell to say we have demonstrated competence as to the ethical levels and what we believe is appropriate. So there was a question regarding travel. Our concept with regards to travel is when you hire a city attorney, it should be as if they are on site. So we do not charge for travel to come to city council meetings, special meetings. If you need us up here, let us know. However, we would ask for your flexibility at sometimes. If you're staff, rather than having us travel all the way up here, if there's a way we can Zoom, that would be absolutely fantastic so we can save time for everyone. But we don't charge for that. The only time to charge for it is if for some reason you want us to go fight a court case outside of the county or go to Denver, Colorado for some reason to do a deposition, then of course we would be charging for that, but only after we got authorization from the appropriate person. There was also a question about how we bill. We bill by 6-minute increments. That makes the a 60-minute hour come into 10 different sections, which is really easy to add up. And whether or not those billings would be available, same response as everyone else gets. You should be getting those billing numbers to know what your attorney is spending, and the city manager and the city council and everyone should have the opportunity to know what it is. And one of the reasons is not only is that the law, but budgets are critical, and maintaining expenses are critical. And having served within a city, and both as a city employee and being on the other side as a contractor, we see ourselves as personally responsible for ensuring that budgets are met. There have been times when I've had to have conversations, the city manager and I are sitting down and we're saying, hey, we had unexpected lawsuits coming in, X, Y, and Z is happening. I've had to have those conversations with the city council and say, what would you like to do? Because I don't want them to have a surprise as to something's coming up, because there's nothing so bad as to be passing your budget just before June 30th and realizing that you're short. We believe very strongly in fiscal responsibility and that these are public dollars for which we are accountable. So we work very closely with the city manager to make sure we stay in budget, and the city council should have no surprises. There was also a question, I believe, with regards to working with the city manager when there is some sort of disagreement. I will tell you this. As much as the city council will see their city attorneys on council days, and sometimes on the phone when they need something, or giving a call on the weekend saying, hey, this came up, or I have a conflicts question, 90% of the work is done with the city manager. It is important to have a good working relationship with both the city manager and with city staff. They need to have the comfort level to ask the questions, and they also need to have the comfort level to know that the advice that they're getting is reliable and accurate, and that the city attorney is doing the best that they can to develop options for them to proceed. Now, there will be times that the city manager and city attorney do not agree, and I actually think that's a good thing. The reason for that is it shows that both people are doing their jobs. The city manager is approaching items from what I call the practical perspective. Law is sometimes not practical, but the city manager is making the policy decisions and the practical decisions, and he's doing that in light of the legal. And so what I have done in past cases is we will often author a joint memo or a joint email, a confidential one, to the city council, so that it goes one way, no Brown Act problems or anything like that, that we both agree on, and everybody knows what it is, outlining the various issues, and we both sign off on it. That way the city manager is not surprised. There should be no surprise as city manager for your city council members coming back, and the city council knows that you have had your best two people get together, put their heads together, and give you the best advice that they can so that you can make an informed decision. That's really important. There's also a question regarding about a difference of opinion between the city council and the public. The city council represents the public. The city council is elected. City council is responsible to the public. There can be various aspects where the public is involved in the process, but ultimately, the decision-making is the elected members. You represent the community. You represent, as a city council, the public as a whole. If, I hate to say this, you don't listen to the public or don't adequately represent their rights, chances are you're going to hear about it at the election box. That's just the way democracy works. But on the other hand, just because you have some gadflies coming in doesn't necessarily mean that they represent the community as a whole. So finding that balance is one of the sometimes difficult things as council members. From the legal perspective, we provide you with the legal options with regards to those policy issues. That's something up to the individual council members to help address, and we can help step you through some of the legal issues as those come up. There was also a question about how to encourage ethical and to help the city council and staff to understand their obligations. Same thing what everybody else said. I'm not going to go through it. It's education, it's training, it's learning the flags. As I've said before, we've been through the city of Bell. We know what that process is like. We provide training materials, new council member orientation. You should have it all, but you know what? As council members, you probably get documents about this thick every year to go through, and that's not including the budget. Seriously, you're not, I'm going to say this, you're not going to remember all that, and that's okay. So our goal as a city manager, the city attorney's office, is to help you reach and recognize those particular opportunities so you don't inadvertently step into things. There was a question about speaking Spanish or Punjabi. Many of our office speak Spanish. Neither Roy or I speak Spanish. I have Thai language interests, but I really don't think that will help here. But we do have that available if people are interested. There was also a question about whether city council members should be involved in personnel matters. I don't want to repeat what everyone else has said because it's been entirely consistent, but there you are in the council manager form of government. City council's role as policymakers and to select a city manager who knows what he or she is doing for the management, balanced with the rights and responsibilities of city council members to receive the information they need to be making an informed decision. All of those things are important, and I hate to say ditto, but I don't have anything else to add, so I'm not going to waste your time on that. There was a question about whether or not city council should be involved in personnel matters. I think I answered that, and there was also a question about city council and investigations of city council members, whether or not I would think that is appropriate. I'll tell you my personal opinion. No, the city attorney should not be involved in that process. It should be an independent person. And I think you've heard that from all three other candidates as well. So again, there are various reasons for that, and there are very good reasons to make sure you have a competent, neutral, unbiased third party being able to make those assessments. There was also a question about a bad experience. Have my clients had bad experiences? Yes, they have. Most of them I would call what I would say the no surprises rule, which is sometimes when you go into closed session and say, we're not going to win this case, and they say, well, we think we need to make a stand. Do we end up winning a lot of those cases? No, we win some of them, but the council is never surprised by what's happened. And speaking of a personal bad experience that I actually learned from, I was covering a planning commission in a city involving a housing element update, including low-income housing and high-density development. This became a very hot political issue. There were a period of 3 meetings, I think, with involving hundreds of people. They averaged 4 hours each at the planning commission level. It was a marathon. And at the last meeting, I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't figure out what I wasn't feeling well, and the vote came up, and the planning commission voted 3-1 to approve the CEQA and 3-1 to make a recommendation to the city council. And they said, well, what's the vote? City attorney, and I said, okay, motion passes. Turned out I was wrong. And you may say, well, why is that the case? Well, there were 7 members, and even though we had a quorum of 4, it turns out there were planning commission rules that said when you make a recommendation to the general plan, you have to have a majority of the quorum make that recommendation. And 3 was not a majority for that, but it was a sufficient vote to make a recommendation on the CEQA. So what were my takeaways from that? Well, I learned, first of all, make sure you reread the commission rules before you go in to make sure you get all the nuances, including that one. The second rule I learned was, after I checked myself into the hospital a few hours later because I was in extreme pain, was don't advise when you need to go to the emergency room. This is why you have backups. So there are things that we have learned as we go through life. And again, I think as Jim said, we have made steps that we think, gee, we could have done that better, but we've never made the same one twice. And I think that's really the key. And then finally, challenges to cities. You know, I got to say, it's really not fair to the others. I came last because I get to hear all their answers as to the challenges of cities, and they've identified them. The police recruitment, the economic issues, and everything else. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just briefly talk about some of the things that they didn't address. Infrastructure and streets are going to be a long-term challenge for you. I think you have an advantage with the extension over there of Hammer Drive and the access that it has to potentially developable land for development purposes and access to the highway. And that could be something that could benefit your community as well. So I know you know what your challenges are, but I think that you also have opportunities here that maybe some other communities with only one access point to the highway do not have. So you are positioned, at least in some areas around here, to actually grow. So those are my thoughts. I think I answered all the questions. Are there any other pending questions that I may have missed?
Any other questions from the public at this time? Go ahead.
Thank you again. My question is to all the firms. Have any of you ever been let go from a law firm previously?
You know, I can answer that personally. I've never been let go from a law firm, ever. To the contrary, most of the people saying, please, would you be willing to stay? Is it something about compensation? We can address that sort of thing. So the reason why I came, I'll tell you this, the reason why I came to Elishire and Winder, I looked at them for over a year, how they treated their employees, how they treated their secretaries, how they treated city staff, and the relationships they had in their communities. I was impressed with them and the service that they offered, which is why I went to them. So I actually left the city of Fresno. I've been there for over a decade, a fantastic city, a great city attorney's office, but I've never had the, hey, please leave us speech. So any other questions, or did you want me to finish up and then maybe you can finish those questions with, how would you like to do this, Mayor?
Any other questions specifically to this group before the others get an opportunity to answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, Mayor, if I could ask Roy if he has any final questions and then just wrap it up.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Roy, do you have any final statements or anything you'd like to say if you're still online?
I would just like to echo, similar to Shannon, I too haven't been terminated from any law firm I've worked for. I looked into Elishire and Winder before joining them for several months. I was at another large law firm and felt that Elishire and Winder brought something to the legal game that I hadn't seen before, a sense of duty and purpose, the desire to give back to the community and making sure that it's not just about how many billable hours you can take from a community, but what you could do to improve the community and give back to the community drew me to them, and that's why I've been there, and thankfully have been elevated to be a partner at the firm. So it's been my pleasure to be there. And then I just wanted to also say thank you again to the council for this opportunity, for the public. And thank you for letting me appear by phone. I know it's kind of choppy and hard to hear, but I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I'm available for any questions, but if not, we look forward to serving your community as your city attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the question.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor and Council. No, Tom Hallen and I have never been let go or fired from any other law firm, from any law firm.
Same for me. It does help that I manage it and own it. So,
I've never been let go by any employer. This is my second go around with Cole Huber. They wanted to hire me back after I spent some time at a major national labor and employment firm. But I appreciate the question.
I appreciate the question as well. I've never been let go.
Yeah, I think we're all going to have similar answers here because I think you fortunately have a great number of agencies to choose from, and I think we're all extremely proud of the firms that we work for. And I think we're all going to say that none of us have been terminated, and I think that goes to show the interest in your community because there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I concur with everyone else. You have a good group of people. I have not ever been let go in that manner, but I will say I did have the privilege of hiring one of the attorneys here in this group at one point in the city of Fresno. So.
Thank you so much. Any further questions before we move on? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the second part of my question, have any of you worked in a law firm that's actually worked for our city in the previous years?
I think we're all nodding no, except.
No, there is. There's a yes.
He used to be the city attorney.
There's a yes. I know.
Yeah, I'm the one yes. Tom Hallanan, yes. I worked for the city in my firm, which was Bush, Ackley, Millich, and Hallanan back in those days. It was not Brenner White. He and I hooked up later. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Council, bring it back to council. Any questions, council, or final thoughts before we move on?
Well, no questions, but comments. I really appreciate all of you guys being here. I mean, it's amazing the quality of firms that we have here, and we feel fortunate. And but unfortunately, we only have to select one. But I really appreciate you guys being here, and the public, and all the questions have really helped. At least has really helped me kind of hopefully make a good decision here. Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments? For me, same thing here. I appreciate the efforts made in the application process and putting together all that information and prepare it for us to read and know a little bit about each other, each firm. So I appreciate the time. Appreciate you exposing yourself and having the public have the opportunity to ask questions and really get to know you guys a little bit better. That's definitely helped us out. Jose, any final thoughts or comments?
I'd like to echo what my counsel has said. Thank you very much for your time and commitment. And what we are planning to do in terms of the next phase of this process, we're going to have an opportunity to go under closed session, and I'll help facilitate. So we will basically move from the, so that not everybody is in this particular space at the same time. We'll make the city hall available. You guys can hang out wherever you guys want at our conference room, or if you want to, there's a little restaurant in the back here. I'll make contact with you when it's your time to come on in, and we'll try to make it as smooth and easy for you. And again, we appreciate your patience in this process. And you guys all talked about, this is the way that democracy works and transparency, and so we very much appreciate your time.
Thank you. So at this moment, we're going to go ahead and move on to our citizen comments. Oh, go ahead.
I know as citizen comments, we will be, conveying what we would recommend for the council. Would it be possible for them to step out? Because I would think it'd be unfair for us to be giving kudos to one versus another and kind of debating. I mean, I would think just out of respect to the firms for their time spent here and the preparation and providing such great information and giving us an overview of what you're about and what you could give to our community. I just feel that out of respect, if we could have it just for the citizens, would that be possible? Before you go into closed session.
Thank you. Council, you guys in agreement? You guys okay with that too? Yeah? Okay.
Okay, then you guys certainly can just follow the chief there, and we're good to go. He'll make sure you guys don't, wrestle each other out there.
Roy.
Yes. Would you like me to hang up and call back in?
Roy,
Yes.
can you please log off from
You want
the
me to
phone?
hang up and call back in?
I'm sorry? Can you?
Would you like me to hang up and call back in?
Yes, please. Can you hang up, and then we'll let your the other attorney that you work for to let you know when to call back.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Monica.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so at this moment, we're going to go ahead and move on to our citizen comments.
Let's be collaborative and get things done right so we don't have to fight and pay these attorneys their fees. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, this is a comment on any item now that's on the closed session, correct? Okay. First of all, I want to, Gopal Samra, 1034 J Street. First of all, I want to thank the entire council. Thank you very much for allowing public participation. We have never done this before as in selection of the legal firm. That is really good, and thank you guys. What I do want to speak on is I know that you guys are getting ready to go into closed session regarding employee appointments and so forth. There's one item in here, item number 3, I would like to kind of touch on. City of Livingston has lots of very, very good employees. Yeah, sometimes, everybody, there's always a little here and here, and sometimes we get into personality conflicts with people. It happens. We understand. But always remember that it is easier and better to work with an employee, resolve your issues, and move forward. It is very important. It is easier to keep good employees than to find good employees, or even the one you can work with and say, okay, here's issues, let's resolve these. I think you guys really, really find a way to keep good employees. We don't want to lose anybody. Times are tough, markets are tough. Getting good, certified, proper employees is very difficult. There's a lot of competition out there. It's never the good ones you're gonna get. It's the ones that others don't want, that are left out there to apply. The ones that are really, really good already have jobs, and the organization they work for are not gonna let them go. So I ask to each and every one of you, please, please find a way to keep all of our good employees. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Rodrigo Espinosa, Merced County Supervisor. I'm here as a citizen of Livingston, a longtime council member, mayor, and now Board of Supervisors. So I'm here a public official for 19 years. I've learned to take a lot of, good words from the constituents. That's why I was voted on to be here and listen to constituents. We're not, we've been through ups and downs and through a lot of city attorneys, city managers. But you know what, as my job as county supervisor, I've had to, I got to work with the Livingston City Council, the Merced City Council, different MAC boards around my district. And, there's all types of individuals you got to learn to work with. And my job in Livingston is to work with the city manager and all the council members. So, all you electeds here that's sitting up here, I consider you my friends. I can call you, but I can call you, but don't, if you don't take my words of advice in a kind manner, so you can change them however you want. But if I call you at different times and you call me back, whether you're at your employment, that's not my fault. You decide, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, you're a public official, just elected official to elected official. When I call you as a friend to talk, you're a public official. Hey, let me know if you were working. Don't meet with me when you're working. So, hey, if you get in trouble, whether you're working over there or working over here, hey, we're friends, just let me know. Hey, well, I'll be glad to meet you at a different time. But you call me. So if you want to change the words, that, hey.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Mr. Mayor, I'm talking on my 3 minutes, so.
There's a,
by law, the speakers are allowed 3 minutes. One mayor already got penalized by the FPPC for $17,000 for cutting off a citizen's comments. So I'm just advising again, as an elected official to elected official. So, I got my 3 minutes, my 5 minutes, I don't know. But like I said, I'm not here to, like I said, the gentleman advice, I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm just advising. I'm just trying to work with you guys, be friends, work together, and it's our community. I live here. I don't live in Merced, I don't live in Legrand or Planada. I work over there, I try to support all my communities, and that's what I'm trying to do, work together. I obviously, sometimes, we can't, if we can't get along with somebody, then, I can only do my best. But I'm only advising, Councilman Kang, Juan Moran, and Mayor, the city manager. I haven't agreed with the city manager on a lot of different things, but like I said here, we're friends. We talk to each other, and that's what I try to do. And it doesn't, with all the law firms, it's up to you guys. You're going to decide, because the city council hires the only attorney is the city attorney and the city manager. It's up to you guys who you're going to fire. They can give you the best advice, but when you get elected, if you don't make the right decisions, it doesn't matter on the city attorney. So, like I said, I'm always there for a call. If you guys need advice, that's what I'm here for, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other?
I have a quick question before you turn on the timer. My question is, are these comments, citizen comments, just in relationship to the firms, or are we also including the closed session items?
Everything.
Everything. Okay, so let me get started. Now you can start the clock. So really quick, first of all, I want to thank all of you for agreeing to have a town hall meeting. I think it was so important, and like Councilmember Moran said, it's showing transparency, showing that some of you, even though you're in a situation at this time in your life, being a representative, you're still trying to make a difference. You're trying to know that the citizens are watching and they are expecting to do, even if you end in a positive note, whatever the outcome may be in a couple of months in regards to the recall. I mean, everyone seems to be afraid of saying that, but that's where we're at right now. And in regards to the firms, they were very clear in regards to your duties as council members and a public individual who's out here making choices for us, for our cities, and for our children in the future. I highly recommend, based on their information and just their sense of feeling good in our community and having a sense of humor and having a Spanish speaker. I wish they'd have Punjabi speakers, but they don't. That's something they could invest in. Maybe you guys could recommend that. It was number 2, Cole Huber, I believe it is. Just the way that they presented, they elaborate a little more in every question they had. Gave their own personal experience in regards to those questions. I have a couple of individuals who also kind of said, yeah, I really like the way they presented. They were really open-minded and willing to work with the council and the citizens. And again, the citizens do drive the council. So that was really positive. I think they touched on a lot of issues the citizens have. So I'm really happy. I'm hoping that you guys make the right call. But if you were to lean one way, that's something that I recommend and a few others to follow me in judgment. And the other thing I was going to say, really quick, I know that there's an item in closed session. I believe it's number 3. I wasn't sure what number, but I'm here on behalf of some of the citizens who have brought to my attention that the council has brought beforehand the issue of a person who has a public works, which is, I'm going to say Anthony. He has requested to have his contract as an at-will employee, individual, to a regular employee where he pays into the union, has some sense of stability. Put yourself in that situation. If you're in a contract and you know that the only person that could pretty much let you go is your city manager, and in this case, the council in itself is unstable. That's the only word I could think of. Very indecisive with their choices, their actions out of council in public. And so I would be fearful in regards to who might be representing our city manager. You all have had that issue before. The citizens came and spoke on it, and you guys made the best decision to keep Jose. And I'm just advocating for Anthony. I've spoken to him. It has no favoritism, just simply we cannot afford to let him go. His experience, and also his dedication to our community. He's invested a lot of time, and things have changed. And so I really recommend that the council considers doing that. Again, he has a family, as we all do, and we always have to advocate for ourselves. And in this case, with the time that we have such difficult times finding jobs and keeping him, I mean, I can't say more than you would be making a big mistake if you do not help him in that sense of coming from at-will employee to a union. It's not going to cost any of you anything. He's not asking for a raise. He's not asking for more duties or less duties. He's not asking for any type of promotion. He's just simply asking for support from the council to be more stable and be more able to come to work and not say, is today the day? So I really hope you guys take that in consideration. And I'm sure we have other people who are going to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and my time's up. But please keep that in mind. Okay, number 2, and we can't afford to let Anthony go. We cannot start from 0. Okay, we've already built on it. Let's keep going. Good job, guys. Hope you make the right choice.
Good evening. My name is Mario Mendoza, and I just want to echo back what Margarita saying about Anthony. I support him. He's a great worker. I've known him since the day he got hired right here in Livingston. I know he's been going through a lot. If I were in his shoes, I would probably do the same thing, because it seems to me some of the public works workers that have been here for a while kind of think the city belongs to them, but it doesn't. It belongs to the people, you know. And I would have taken it differently, sir. I would have. I mean, some of these people that actually give you a hard time, I wouldn't be here. I mean, I wouldn't have your position because I would have taken personal and I would have stepped it up a notch. But you know what, sir? You keep up the good job, and hopefully you're still here next to the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments?
Yes, Jason Ross, 1629 First Court.
Go ahead.
Now, I've been a manager for over 20 years, and when you find a good employee, you want to keep them. You fight to keep them. It's the employees that are not filling their job commitment. Those type you want to let go. But Anthony, I think it's a mistake to let him go. You want to fight to keep someone like that. And that's all. Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you.
Hello, council members. This is Leticia Vasquez. I'll talk really fast. When it comes to the law firms, I think you have your plate to your hands full. They all sound very wonderful and awesome. But the one that stood out a lot to me was the Cole Huber law firm. I think they had a lot of good information, and I feel like they connected with us because they're funny, and I just, I think that would be a good firm to look at. Another thing that I'm going to address the same concern about the item number 3 when it comes to Anthony. I've been coming to city meetings for a while now, and when I see him here, I feel that he's very humble and very respectful of people, and when he presents, he's always kind and professional, and I think that the city has invested a lot of time in him and his trainings and things like that, and I think he has invested his time in our city, and it looks like he cares about our city, so I really hope that you provide the opportunity for him to be an employee so he can have security when it comes to his job. Another thing that I noticed when citizens are up here commenting, I noticed, Mayor Aguilar and Councilmember Garcia, you're reading text messages and you're having side conversations when somebody's addressing you, and I find that to be very disrespectful. So I just wanted to point that, we are watching you and we're here. So I think that, you're mindful of how you carry yourself and how you portray yourself in these meetings. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I have 2 emails.
Okay,
Two.
go ahead, Monica.
Okay. The first one, I received an email from Michael McGuire. So this is what it says. This is just a brief note to express my appreciation to Anthony Chavarria, for the work he is doing for the people of Livingston as Public Work Director. Mr. Chavarria's expertise and inspirational attitude are what the people of Livingston need for the foreseeable future. I got another one for Tony Avina. I'm a long-term Public Works employee, and I would like to communicate that Anthony has been the best Public Works Director that I have worked under.
Thank you, Monica. Any other comments? On the phone? Anybody else?
Hello,
Mayor,
Diego Castillo.
Go ahead on the phone.
Hello, Diego Castillo. 855. I just was calling. I'm calling into. I wasn't aware that Anthony had given his resignation, but as a developer, I just want to. And I dealt with everybody from Merced County up to Tracy. I haven't came across anybody that has come as helpful and professional as Anthony and very knowledgeable. So I think it would be very hard to replace what he brings to the city, especially with the issues we're having with the current water system. So I would think it would be a mistake and a setback if he was to leave the city. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the phone?
Mayor, I have a comment.
What was that? Any comments?
Yes, on the phone, can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Juan. This is Gabriel Salazar, 1024 Central Court. I just want to express my support and the continuation of
Mr. Anthony as a Public Works Director for the City of Livingston. He has done a fabulous job as a Public Works Director. I remember in January, way back, there was a water breach between the street and our front yard. And we called around 9 in the morning, and within 30 minutes, we received some help from the Public Works guys. It was Dustin and another gentleman. And within a couple hours, they were able to finish the job, help out. My mom was a little bit older with the situation, and they kind of went the extra mile as staff. And I know it's indicative and reflective of the leadership that they have there at Public Works. So I really hope that the council rejects and Anthony withdraws his resignation letter so he could get the city and where he could get employment where he gets protected under civil status and not being at will employed. So that's all I'm asking for. I think other residents in the community also recognize and appreciate Anthony's work. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the phone? Okay, sounds like we don't have any more comments. So thank you, everybody. Now we're going to go into our closed session. Go ahead.
Can I just clarify something real quick? I think so. One of the, I think it was Ms. Margarita that came up here in regards, and you did mention about the attorneys that spoke Spanish. I think the one that spoke Spanish was Lozano Smith, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
There's 2 of them that speak Spanish.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go into our closed session at this time. So thank you, everybody. Yes, we will.